Chapter 1, Prologue. Chapter Text. Winter Wars, being a history of the Stark kings and queens following the reforming of the realm by King Robb of House Stark. Written by Archmaester Legos of the Citadel of Old Town 505 AC. While Aegon the Conqueror may have forged the Seven Kingdoms into a realm, it was his descendant Aerys Targaryen, the Mad King, who broke the realm. However, it was just prior to Robert's rebellion that a discovery would be made in the north that would empower another house to reforge the realm. While the realm would not be the same as it once was, it would be hard to deny that the time since the Winter Wars has been the most prosperous time in the history of Westeros. The Starks of Winterfell had always been a powerful house, but they had never been known for being exceedingly rich. That was until 281 AC when rare gemstones and platinum deposits were discovered in the northern mountains. The largest deposits were discovered in the southern tip of the northern mountains just north of Winterfell itself. These deposits were so dense that they made the Starks the richest house in the Seven Kingdoms. Although, no one would know this by looking at them. House Stark never claimed to be wealthy, nor did they live lavishly. Still to this very day, House Stark of Winterfell continues to be known as a humble house despite their rather extreme wealth. While the ignorance of the realm to this wealth would normally be inexcusable, in this instance it is understandable. A year after the discovery of gemstones and platinum, Robert's rebellion began in earnest. Rather than describe this war, I will simply point you to any of the other well-documented sources on the matter. House Stark was particularly blooded by this war, and the new Lord of Winterfell immediately set to recovering his strength in the north. The soldiers who had come home alive from the war were paid, but not just for their service in the war but for the work they would soon do for the north. Lord Eddard Stark began several ambitious projects starting in 285 AC with the construction of the Northern Navy. The Northern Navy was but a dream in the mind of Eddard Stark at the time. Not since Brandon the Burner had there even existed a standing navy in the north, let alone what Lord Eddard had in mind. He first needed to find shipbuilders who could build ships strong enough to survive northern winters. Lord Stark found his answer in White Harbor, where he saw Ebenese ships for the first time. Their ships were stout, powerful, and large. Although not particularly fast compared to the Iron Fleet, the Ebenese ships were as fast as southern war galleys and stronger by an order of magnitude. Not since the Century of Blood had Ebenese ships been used for war. Their ships were mostly for whaling, but many Ebenese shipbuilders took up the challenge of teaching the Northmen how to build these stout ships. It also helped that they were paid handsomely for their teachings. The navy would consist of 500 warships, the largest single fleet of any house in Westeros. This Grand Armada would be split into two separate fleets. The Shivering Sea Fleet and the Sunset Sea Fleet, each with 250 warships. It would take nearly 8 years to complete the whole navy, but some ships were able to participate in the Greyjoy Rebellion. The Northmen also built hundreds more ships meant for whaling and fishing during the winter to aid in maintaining food supplies. It was also in 285 AC that Lord Eddard set forth building the most extensive road system in the North's long history. The winter roads aided in the movement of trade goods and supplies. The roads also made it easier for troops to be moved across the massive territory. These troops would also be rearmed with the best weapons and armor available. Each northern man at arms would be given a spear, 3 throwing axes, a castle-forged longsword, a round oaken shield, chain mail, plate armor covered in boiled leather, and a half-helm that featured a protective nose guard and eye holes with a sheet of chain mail attached to cover the neck and shoulders. Lord Stark also expanded his cavalry forces to be able to compete with southern knights. Moat Cailin was also rebuilt to secure the entry into the north. While Lord Eddard was sure that even the ruin could hold the causeway in the event of an attack from the south, he set forth the ambitious plan to rebuild the castle. Stonemasons rebuilt old towers and replaced wooden walkways and keeps with stone ones. In only 5 years Moat Cailin transformed from being a ruin to a fortress once again. Though curiously, Lord Eddard did not name a lord to the new fortress, only a steward. Finally, Lord Eddard began expanding Wintertown and Winterfell. The town was made larger and buildings were built that were designed specifically for housing large amounts of people during the winter. Winterfell was given a refurbishment. The castle grounds were paved save areas like the yard that were frequently used by horses. The broken tower was rebuilt, the first keep was made livable, and a third 60-foot tall wall was added with a dry moat between it and the second wall. The castle's stonework and towers were all refurbished. These and many other acts by Lord Eddard became known as Lord Stark's investments. A curious name, as records from Maester Lewin at the time do not indicate that Lord Eddard saw these as investments but rather as necessities. Although, it should be noted that he did make significant investments in northern infrastructure, making winters easier on the north. It also should be noted that these investments would pay for themselves in the decades to come, both monetarily and militarily. The growing wealth of the north would very quickly attract the attention of southern lords. One house in particular saw an opportunity in the north to grow strong. Chapter 2, The Rose Grows. Chapter text. She ran as fast as her little feet would carry her. Tears streamed down her face as she sprinted through halls and downstairs until she was running through a courtyard and then through a garden. Her brother Loras was dying. Her father had only just returned from fighting in the Iron Islands. He survived, but now Loras would die. She had seen him just a few minutes before. Her brother, red as can be, with his haggard breathing and sweat pouring down his face. The fever was burning through him and it was going to kill him. Their maester had told them to say goodbye. He didn't even have the courtesy to say the gods could save her brother. All he told her was to say goodbye. Margaery had prayed to the Seven for her brother to be healed. She said all the right words she had been taught. She resorted to begging when her 6-year-old mind couldn't remember any more prayers. At one point she even forbade the stranger to take her brother, but Loras only got sicker. Now she ran faster and faster towards the one thing she hadn't tried yet. She did say goodbye to Loras, but as she walked out of his room, she felt a wind blow through the hall outside her brother's chamber, and it almost felt like something was calling to her. It was in that moment the stories of the North and their old gods came to her mind. If the Seven refused to save her brother, then maybe the old gods would answer. She whipped around a corner and saw a large wooden door. With all the might she could muster she pushed the heavy oaken door open and stood in the presence of what may have been the most ancient part of Highgarden. The godswood of Highgarden was tended to, but only so far as it was another garden. She saw the three faces staring at her, their white branches gripping one another until it looked as though three trees became one below a red canopy. Margaery didn't waste any time. She threw herself in front of the heart trees. She realized she did not know any prayers to the old gods. Were they like the words said to the Seven, or were they more ancient? Did she need to speak the old tongue for the gods to know what she was saying? The tears came again and suddenly words came falling out of her mouth. Please, save my brother. I'm begging you. I don't want him to die. I don't want him to go away. I just want him to be okay. She begged, her fingernails digging into the backs of both of her hands, tears streaming down her face as her words became sobs. She sucked in air between each word. I just want my brother to live. Please let him live. I want him to be okay. Her prayers began repeating and her words ran together. Suddenly, she stopped. There was a stillness in the air that was unnatural. Leaves and petals that had been blowing gently around her seemed to now hang in the air, defying the ground's pull on them. It remained like that for a second as she tried to catch her breath. She then looked up at the face staring back at her on the tree. Her puffy eyes and red cheeks met the red eyes of the gods and all seemed to stop. She reached out a tiny hand and laid it on the face of the tree. When she opened her eyes, she was somewhere cold. Somewhere she had never seen before. Somewhere beautiful. Two young boys ran through a forest, no, a godswood. She thought for a second one was her brother, but then realized it wasn't. Auburn. Auburn was all she saw before being thrown back into her own body. The wind now howled around her in a way it never had before. Margaery stood pulling her hand from the face of the tree. She knew this was an answer to her prayer, she just did not know if it was the answer she wanted. Her little bare feet padded towards the door of the godswood. She looked back just once and saw the wind blowing through the trees. It was no longer howling through the godswood. Rather, it was dancing in a way that made her smile. Despite the calm, she still cried herself to sleep that night. Her brother Garland being forced to comfort her until she was too tired to keep her eyes open. It was when she woke up and walked down the hall that she saw something that would change her life forever. Her brother's door was open. She pushed it slightly to see the boy sitting on the edge of the bed. Not red or pale or sickly but healthy. His eyes were bright, his skin dry, and his smile was the best thing she had ever seen in her life. The maester finished his examination of the boy and Laura slid from the edge of his bed and opened his arms wide, seeing Margary in his door. Their mother in the corner, a small white cloth in her hands, wiping happy tears from her eyes. Margary's feet carried her fast into her brother's arms. He was healthy, he was alive, he was happy. She heard what the maester said to their mother next. Lady Tyrell, I have never in my many years seen anyone recover from the brink of death like Lord Loras has. I must admit this was not of my doing but the will of the gods. The will of the gods. The will of the old gods. She let go of her brother but hugged him one more time for good measure. Her mother chuckled at the display. Go, my sweeterling. Have breakfast with your father and brothers. Laura still needs to rest a bit more. But when you can today, thank the gods for giving your brother back. Margary smiled and finally let go of her brother. She ran out the door, hearing her mother and the maester laugh behind her. She ran as fast as her little feet would carry her to the godswood. Margary threw the oaken door open again and saw them. The wind still danced through the red leaves of their weirwood branches. Her feet padded as she walked up to the faces again. Little knees gently touched stone and she reached her tiny fingers up and out once again to touch the white face of the centermost tree. She was cold again. Back in the other godswood, and there was the boy. The boy with auburn hair. He was praying. When she looked closer, he slowly looked her in the eyes. Once again, she was thrown back into her body. Maybe that is one of the old gods, she said in her own mind. No, she silently realized. He was more like her than one of the gods who had healed her brother. Margary was not peering into a different world or a different time, just a different place. But she was thankful. She pressed her hand deeper into the face of the tree until it was flat against the face, and with a smile and closed eyes, she spoke a new prayer, a happier prayer. Thank you. Chapter 3, The Pack Survives. Chapter text. Please. It stopped him in his tracks. The wind kicked up in the godswood for a brief moment and a small voice came with it. Rob looked at his brother John. Did you say something? Rob asked his brother. No, John said, looking at Rob like he was crazy. If that hit to the head I gave you during our sparring match earlier is causing you to hear things, then maybe you should go see Maester Lewin. He chuckled, only to be given a playful shove by Rob. If you think that hit was anything other than a luck strike, then you are more delusional than I am, Rob said, taking off as his black-haired half-brother began chasing after him again. The play stopped when John began to cough later that afternoon. The cough turned into vomiting and the vomiting into fainting. John had quickly been rushed to his room where Maester Lewin could examine him. Over the next couple of days, it only got worse for John. He was sweating, his chest heaving, his breathing haggard. It was so bad that Rob's mother was watching over John. His mother, who had shunned John for his entire short life, was now worried for that same life. Rob had never seen his mother behave like this towards his half-brother. It was almost as if she actually cared about him. He would catch her praying next to his bedside. Let him live, she'd beg. He knew it was bad. Even Theon, his father's new ward, looked at Rob with sad eyes. Theon had recently lost his brothers and now Rob was going to lose his. His father spent his mornings in the godswood for a whole week as John got sicker. Rob wanted to join him, but Rob did not know what to say to the old gods. He believed and followed them, but how was he supposed to ask the gods to save his brother? Please. The voice came back to his mind. He walked solemnly to the godswood. His father had left some time ago and now Rob was alone in the godswood. He strode around the black pool at the center to the ancient heart tree. His knees hit the ground almost as if he was crumbling. Tears left his eyes, but there were no sobs, no heavy breathing, just sadness and fear. Please, let him live, was all Rob could say. Part of his prayer was the voice on the wind and part was his mother's words. He looked up into the eyes of the heart tree. He felt warm. When he looked forward, he saw a little girl about his age praying with a smile on her face. His eyes met hers and he swore he had never seen anything more beautiful in his whole life. Suddenly, he was back in Winterfell. A hand placed on his shoulder. He turned to look who it was. His father towered above him. What did you pray for, son? Eddard asked with a smile. If I tell you it won't come true, Robb said without joy. Eddard chuckled at this and knelt next to the boy. What if the gods have already answered your prayer? The elder Stark asked with a bright smile. It was at these words that wind began to dance through the trees and Robb felt something, an answer. How is Jon? The words fell out of Robb's mouth almost as if he hadn't been the one to ask them. Lord Stark simply smiled and stood up. Why don't you go see for yourself? Before Ned could register, Robb was sprinting away. His feet carried him down hallways and upstairs until he ran through a door to see Jon sitting up on his bed, being embraced by Lady Stark. The two were smiling. Robb did not know why, but he didn't really care. The gods let his brother live, and Robb next found himself jumping onto the bed where Jon was laughing. He even heard chuckles coming from his mother at his display of affection towards his brother. Robb did not have to wonder long at why his mother had embraced his half-brother. Lady Catelyn had prayed too for Jon to live and had come to see the young boy as her own son. Catelyn begged Ned. Make him a Stark. I told the gods I would be like a mother to him if he lived, and I have already grown to love him like a son, Ned. The tears in her eyes were reflected by the tears in Ned's own. Eddard wrote a letter to his friend, the king, and Jon was a Snow no longer. Jon Stark, while still coming after all of Eddard's true-born sons and daughters, would be a part of his family as a Stark. Chapter 4, Power in Curiosity. Notes. Wow, this got lots of love really fast. Thank you all for the awesome comments and love on my first fan fiction. Again, I'll be posting one chapter a day until this is all finished, unless a chapter is very short, then you will get two. Also, just to let everyone know, yes, I have severely altered some characters like Theon and Catelyn to just be a bit better human beings, and I've buffed other characters like Robb and Eddard. Please understand this is all for the fun aspect of the story. If you want the real characters and how they would act, please go and read GRM's books. They are incredible and such an inspiration. Also, comment if you find the Harry Potter reference. Enjoy. Chapter text. Samwell Tarly knocked on the side of a bookcase in the library at Highgarden to get Margaery's attention. You know, sometimes you read more than Lord Willers does, and that is saying something. Sam said with a smile. But unlike Willers, I don't read boring things. She said with all the pride her 12-year-old voice could muster. She and Sam laughed at her false pomp, and he pulled a book down from the bookshelf. What are you reading today, my lady? Sam politely asked. He had always been so polite to her. She guessed it was the way he thanked her for getting him away from his father. 2 years ago, Sam came to Highgarden after failing miserably as a page in the Arbor. Margaery saw the boy reading in the library one day, and the two struck up a conversation. She then hatched a plan to help save Sam from his own father. Margaery convinced Willers to take the boy on as a squire. Willers did not need a young squire who hoped to be a knight, but rather one whom Willers could teach and in turn share thoughts and have robust discussion with, and so it was. Samwell Tarly became the squire to the heir to Highgarden. Randyll Tarly was actually rather impressed. He was even more impressed when his son came to visit Hornhill a year later with Willers. Gone was the shy, weak, stuttering boy. Samwell had become an eloquent and confident, albeit still rather round boy. His father was impressed and continued to support Samwell as Willers' squire. My lady? Samwell asked, breaking Margaery out of her thoughts. An History of the Attempted Andal Invasions of the North, written by Archmaester Oleander. She said with a smile. You know, I don't think I have ever asked what are you reading today, my lady, without you responding with the title of a book that wasn't in some way related to the North. I cannot imagine we have too many more books about the North, even in a library as large as this one. He said with a smile, pulling down another book Willers had requested and setting it on the table next to Margaery. As far as I can tell, I have read all the books about the North in this library. This is my third time reading through this one. As she said this, Sam almost fell off the stool he was standing on. My lady, you can't have seriously read all the books on the North in this library that many times. Sam said, deadpanning. Well, this one I have read only about 3 times because it's rather boring. I've read the stories and fables of the ancient North probably 8 times. Margaery said casually. Samwell's jaw must have hit the floor, or perhaps he just dropped a book. I cannot believe I have known you for 2 years and I never knew you read that much about the North. Sam said with a chuckle as he placed another book down on the table. Since the day the old gods had answered her prayer for her brother, she had been enchanted by not just stories about the old gods but about the North itself. Her parents found it odd but did not stop the young girl in her curiosity. Willers encouraged her to learn more about the realm and learn she did. She loved the North even though she had never been there before. Their stories were ancient, and the people were proud. She even grew to dislike the warmth of the South and almost yearned for the cold of the North. She had even taken to worshipping the old gods in secret. Although she did keep faith with the Seven, it had been the old gods that had answered her prayers and it was the old gods who truly had her devotion. You know, Lord Willers once told me that once you have learned all you can know about something from a library you should go beyond. Sam said in an almost cryptic way. What do you mean, Sam? Margaery asked curiously. Well, he told me that there is only so much of the world that you can learn from books. Sometimes you have to go to a place or speak to the people from that place to learn more about that place. He said in a scholarly manner. I am not sure I have ever heard someone say the word place 3 times in quick succession like that before. She said, teasing. He smiled at her jest. Sam, how am I supposed to go to the North? I am rather certain my family would not allow me to simply gallivant across the wildest kingdom in the realm. Perhaps you do not have to go there to learn more about it. Sure, you cannot go there yet, but why not write a northern lord and ask him to tell you about the North, or better yet, why not ask your father if he would allow you to write to a lord's son or daughter who is around our age. As you grow up, they will be able to share their experiences of growing up in the North with you. He smiled, rather proud of his idea. Margaery's face lit up. She had thought of the idea before but came to the conclusion that it would be foolish to ask to be allowed to do so. But, hearing the idea from someone else made her realize that perhaps it wasn't as outlandish a request as she thought. Sam, that is brilliant. She said, standing up. I do have my moments. He said, picking up his stack of books. I would imagine Lord Tyrell could write a lord on your behalf. Sam said as he made his way to the door, Margaery walking alongside him. She was so excited about the idea she had neglected to put her book back. Thank you, Sam, I will go speak with him at once. Margaery said as they went their separate ways. She found her father in his study and knocked on the wood door. Enter. Her father said with what she imagined was a smile. Her father was a plump man with a sculpted beard. Her grandmother considered him an oaf, and frankly she thought he was too. But Mace Tyrell was nothing if not sweet to his daughter. She would say she had him wrapped around her finger, but honestly, he wrapped himself around her finger the day she was born. There was nothing he was not willing to do for his daughter, or any of his children for that matter. Ah, my sweet daughter. To what do I owe the pleasure of your company? He said, waving her into the seat across from his dark wood desk. I have a request, father. She said with a shy smile, hoping he would not find it foolish. Anything for you, my rose. He said without even questioning what she would ask for. Oh, her sweet father, so gullible and easy to manipulate. He was very lucky she loved him, as she could probably convince him to throw himself off a cliff if she asked for it. I would like to write another child in the North. I have read all I can about the North in our library, but I am still curious about their experiences and what it is like to grow up there. She asked, her bright eyes flickering with excitement. Mace stroked his beard as if to be thinking about the idea. He opened his mouth to say something, only for a voice to come from behind Margaery. I think that is a wonderful idea, child. Olenna Tyrell said, her voice sweet but aged. Margaery, I think your curiosity about other kingdoms is admirable, and I believe allowing you to explore that curiosity would be most beneficial to your learning. Lady Olenna said, walking up next to where Margaery was seated while looking directly at Mace as if to force him to say yes. I would have to agree. Mace said, trying to make it seem as though he thought of the idea first. We should never stifle curiosity, and I will not allow my daughter's love of learning be smothered. He said in a voice that made her think he was going into battle. Margaery smiled brightly. Thank you, father, thank you, grandmother. I will not forget this. She rose and hugged both of them. I do think that you should write someone of similar station to you, however. Olenna added as Margaery hugged Mace. The Starks have a boy the same age as you, my sweet Rose. He would make a good writing partner for you. The heir to Winterfell must have plenty of experiences to share with you. Now run along, I would like to speak with your father," Olenna said as her granddaughter gave her another hug. Margaery closed the door behind her. Olenna turned to Mace. "You should feel very blessed the gods gave that girl my sense." She spoke harshly to her son as she took a seat across from him. "Whatever do you mean, mother?" Mace asked curiously. "That is precisely what I mean. You do not recognize the boon you have just been given. Your daughter wants to write to a northern child around her age. You could have at least had the sense to name Robb Stark for her. Thank the gods I was here to guide her to write to that boy," Lady Olenna said as she looked at her son with disapproval. Mace still looked at his mother as if he did not understand. "Mace, Robb Stark is heir to Winterfell, his father is incredibly rich, and they are." Olenna stopped as she realized Mace was not following her line of reasoning. "Robb Stark would be a wonderful match for Margaery." "Gods above, Mace, you are dense," Olenna said, throwing her hands into the air. "But mother, you know I have always believed that Margaery would make a wonderful queen," Mace said with a silly smile. Olenna could not help but agree. The problem was it would never happen, or at least the circumstances by which it would happen escaped her. "Do you know who King Robert Baratheon was fostered within the Vale?" Olenna asked with a trapping smile. Mace shook his head. "Eddard Stark." "Do you know how old Joffrey Baratheon, the Crown Prince, is?" Again, Mace had no answer. "He is 9. "Do you know how old Lord Stark's eldest daughter is?" Before Mace could answer, Olenna answered for him. "She is 9. Put all this information together and Sansa Stark will be betrothed to Joffrey Baratheon within the next 5 or so years. Robb Stark may be betrothed to the king's daughter too if something is not done before then," she said, leaning back in her chair, the wheels turning in her mind at the possibilities. "But mother, shouldn't we put our efforts into securing a betrothal with the crown now?" he asked. His mother almost laughed at his stupidity. "You truly do not understand, do you? Eddard Stark is the head of the most powerful collection of families in the Seven Kingdoms," she said in a now very serious tone. "He is married to Catelyn Tully, which makes Hoster Tully, Lord of the Riverlands, his father by law. Eddard's sister by law is Lysa Tully, whose husband is Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King and Lord of the Vale. Eddard's eldest son will maintain this alliance between the North, Riverlands, and Vale, as his uncle will be Lord of the Riverlands and his cousin the Lord of the Vale. Mace, Eddard Stark is the most powerful man in Westeros, not Robert Baratheon," Olenna said in a matter-of-fact tone. "Lord Stark is rich, he has a powerful navy, a strong army, he is effective in rule, and in the event of a succession crisis, holds the most powerful alliance in his hands. If we are being honest, a succession crisis is a possible scenario since Robert has 2 brothers, one of whom is an effective military commander while the other is well loved by all and commands the Stormlands. They may not sit idly by as their nephew assumes the throne one day. Mace, if there is ever a war for the throne in the Seven Kingdoms again, Eddard Stark will be a kingmaker. All of that power will one day belong to his son." She took a breath before continuing. "Even without a succession crisis, Margaery would be well matched with Robb, as it is likely his sister will marry the future king." Olenna paused to allow her oath of a son to catch up. "If Margaery is married to Robb, we become a part of that alliance. An alliance that would be able to control the whole of Westeros through sheer might. We would be a part of a collection of families that could dictate the inner workings of the realm for a generation, maybe longer." Finally, Olenna saw the gears turning in Mace's head. He was coming around to the idea, and he was coming around quickly, thank the gods. "Well mother, it seems as though I have a letter to write to Lord Stark," he said with a smile, picking up a quill and paper. "Good, I will leave you to it then," she said, rising as her son began to write, a smile on her face. Still as easy as ever to manipulate the poor fool. But she knew that the future of her house would ride on the letters between Margaery and Robb, and she would have to trust that her granddaughter could woo this boy. Olenna smiled to herself. Of course, she would be able to woo him. Margaery was Olenna's granddaughter after all. Chapter 5, A Letter from Highgarden. Notes. I am posting this and the next chapter because they are twin chapters. So lucky for you guys, you get 2 chapters today. Chapter text. What did you do? Arya said teasingly at her brother. Honest to gods, I have no idea. Rob looked down at the table as his father's servant walked away. You don't think he knows about the rat in the brothel? Theon asked, hoping his joke hadn't been discovered. That was your idea. Why would Rob get in trouble for that? Jon said as Arya giggled at the three boys as they sat outside in the yard. Best go and find out why father wants to see me, he said, standing up to answer his father's summons. Rob, just don't rat me out, Theon said with no humor. Really, Theon? Rat you out? The 6-year-old Arya asked, deadpanning only for Theon to then realize what he said. Rob heard Arya laughing loudly behind him as Theon tried to silence the girl. He walked towards his father's study, genuinely not knowing why he had been summoned. Rob enjoyed the clever prank, but if they had ever been caught, it was always his mother that scolded them, not his father, so he knew this was different. Rob reached his father's study and knocked on the door. Enter. The tone was gruff but friendly as Rob pushed the wooden door open. You summoned me, father, Rob said as politely as he could. Close the door, son, his father said with a smile. Have a seat, I have a letter I want you to take a look at. Who is it from? Rob asked as Eddard handed him the letter. Mace Tyrell. Rob looked up at his father when he said this. Why would he write to Winterfell? Rob asked, only for his father to smile and gesture down at the letter. Lord Eddard Stark. I apologize for not having written sooner. The last time you and I saw one another was outside the walls of Pike, if I do recall correctly. The letter started and it droned on and on until Rob finally got to the point. The reason I am writing this letter to you is because my daughter Margaery has developed a sort of curiosity for the North. Having read all our books in the castle library on the North, she requested to be allowed to write another child of similar age in the North. My understanding is that your son, Rob, is 2 and 10, just like my Margaery is. As they are of similar social position, I believe he would make a good writing companion for my daughter. If it's so, pleases you Lord Stark, I would ask that young Rob be allowed to write my daughter to help give her an idea of what the North is like. With the warmest regards. Mace of House Tyrell, Lord of Highgarden, Lord Paramount of the Reach, Warden of the South. Rob stopped reading after Warden of the South, even though Lord Tyrell had 2 or 3 more titles. What do you think? Eddard asked his son curiously. Rob had been taught to look for trickery and deceit from Southerners like Lord Tyrell, but could detect none here. I am not sure. Is this a test? Rob asked, not quite understanding. Eddard chuckled. Not everything the Southrons do is a trick. I think his daughter genuinely wants to write to someone from the North. Eddard kept to himself that he thought Mace was looking to match his daughter with Rob. Truth be told, Eddard was not opposed to the match in the slightest. The Reach had the largest army in the 7 Kingdoms and could help supply the North with extra food during winter. This match would also expand the alliance of the North, the Riverlands, and the Vale to include the Reach. Eddard had already neutralized the Iron Islands when he asked to take Theon as a ward. When Theon would come of age, he would likely be friendly to the North. Now he had the opportunity to bring the Reach into the alliance. Eddard prayed every day that war would never return to the 7 Kingdoms during his life, but if it did, his house would be more than ready. Rob thought for a moment. I think I would like to write to her. I've never gotten to know any other Southerner save for Mother. I guess while she learns from me, I could learn from her. Rob said with a genuine smile. Good, I will write a letter back to Lord Tyrell tonight, and I want you to write your first letter to Margaery tonight as well. Eddard said, smiling as he gave his son the order. Yes, father. Rob said with a nod, taking the order more seriously than Ned thought he needed to. Eddard dismissed the boy and Rob went back out to the yard. There he found Arya attacking Jon with a wooden sword. Theon immediately rose to his feet when he saw Rob. Was it the rat? Theon asked, pale in the face. He knows about everything, Theon. He is going to write to your father. I am not sure, but I think he is recommending to your father that you be sent to the wall because you just aren't cut out to be Lord of the Iron Islands. Seems your life is to be a life of service and celibacy, Rob said with the greatest expression of seriousness he could muster. Theon turned as white as a sheet and his jaw dropped. Arya and Jon stood behind him. They both looked at each other, then at Rob. All 3 slowly lost their composure and burst into laughter as Theon realized that he had just been fooled. Rob, that was not funny in the slightest. He punched Rob in the shoulder. Harder than would be considered playful, still not hard enough to really hurt. Rob could see that Theon was starting to smile. "I did not rat out your rat, you rat," Rob said with mirth. "Father received a letter from Mace Tyrell," Rob stated as the Stark siblings regained their composure. "What did he want?" Arya said, less than polite. She really had the North in her veins. "For me to write his daughter. He said she is curious about the North and wants to learn more about the people, and since we are the same age, he thinks I would be a good writing companion," Rob said in a matter-of-fact tone. Jon and Arya seemed appeased by this answer, but Theon began to smirk. "Southern girls can be a handful. Watch yourself, Rob," was all Theon said as he patted Rob's shoulder and walked past him heading for the kitchen. Rob looked in Theon's direction curiously. "What does that even mean?" Rob said to Jon and Arya. Arya just shrugged her shoulders. "Isn't he technically a Southerner?" Jon said, questioning. "Can you really consider the Ironborn Southern though?" Rob replied to Jon's question with a question. "Are you two really going to have this conversation about the differences between Northerners, Southerners, and Ironborn right now?" Arya said, raising her wood sword to rest on her shoulder. Jon and Rob looked at each other. "No," both said in unison as they decided to keep Arya entertained with more sword practice. It was nice of her father to allow them to train her when they were not busy, so it was best to use their time wisely. Later that afternoon Rob found himself at his desk in his chambers. Paper and quill out, he began to write his first letter to Margaery Tyrell. The first letter of what would become the rest of his life. Chapter 6, A Letter from Winterfell. Notes. Please read. I may not have mentioned this, but Winter Wars uses the book as its base and the show as secondary material. You will likely start needing some knowledge of the books moving forward from this point, but you will have a basic understanding if you have seen the show. But if you read something you don't understand, go look it up on a wiki of Ice and Fire. Great resource, highly recommend. Chapter text. Margaery had been leaving her embroidery lesson and was heading to the stables. Her and Garlan were going to go riding this afternoon. She was already in her riding wear when Maester Lomis came walking towards her from the other side of the courtyard. "Lady Margaery, your father received word back from Winterfell," the old Maester said. This stopped Margaery in her tracks. "And what did it say?" "Well, my lady, there was a letter from Lord Eddard to your father." Lomis paused and smiled. "And one letter for you from Robb Stark." He smiled even wider, handing the young girl a rolled piece of paper. Her eyes were bright, and her smile made it seem as though she was glowing. "Would you mind telling Garlan I will have to join him riding later? I need to attend to this," she said with excitement as the Maester chuckled, nodding his head. She walked past him carrying the letter back up to her chambers. Margaery lightly closed the door behind her while opening the letter as she walked over to her desk. She was almost jumping with excitement as she read the letter. "Dear Lady Margaery, I am honored that your father chose me to be your writing companion. As I understand, you want to learn more about the experiences of Northerners, and while I am not sure how different they are from your own, I will do my best to make you feel as though you are experiencing everything that I do. I hope it would not be too much to ask that you tell me a bit about yourself. I have only ever met one Southern woman before, and she was my own mother. It would be fair to say that I am curious about you just as you are curious about the North." At those words Margaery found herself blushing. It was sweet of him to ask to know about her even as she wanted to know more about the North. She found herself imagining what Robb looked like. Was he tall and rough like how the Maesters described Northerners? Did he have strong arms and a good heart? Was he handsome? She shook these thoughts from her mind as she continued to read his letter. "I look forward to answering any of your questions and sharing my stories with you so long as you are willing to share your stories with me. If there is anything you would like to know about, feel free to ask me and I will tell you as much as I can about it. I hope that I can help you understand more about our home and people, and I hope that my letters bring you both knowledge and joy. With my deepest sincerity. Robb of House Stark, heir to Winterfell." This boy was more polite and eloquent than she had expected. He made her blush and feel excited all from words on a piece of paper. Margaery had always been adored by boys, but none had ever really been worth her time or attention. But Rob, in only a few words on a piece of paper, had piqued her interest and gained her full attention. She had not expected to receive a letter from him right away, but was all too happy to receive one. Margaery picked up her quill and began writing a reply. She stored away Rob's letter till her finished writing her own and then made her way to the Maester's chambers. After directing Maester Lomis to have the letter sent to Winterfell and given to Robb Stark, she went back down to the stables, now over an hour late for her ride with Garland. Someone decided to take their time this afternoon. Her elder brother accused from the top of his horse. "I am sorry to have kept you waiting, Garland. There was a matter I needed to attend to," she said as she threw her leg over her own horse. "That matter wouldn't happen to be a letter from a certain heir to Winterfell, would it?" Garland jokingly questioned. What happened next caught even Margaery off guard. She blushed. She blushed at her brother's teasing. Not because she was embarrassed, but because it made her think back to Robb. "How did you know?" she asked, sterner than she expected her tone to be. Garland laughed at the poor girl. "Oh, Maester Lomis told me, and by your reaction the letter seems to have made you rather happy," her brother teased as the two began to ride together out of the gates of the castle. "I am not sure I have ever seen you turn that shade of red before, sister. It makes your eyes glow." Now she grew even more red as he teased the poor girl. "He seems to be very nice, and I am happy that I get to learn more about the North from him," she said, facing forward, trying to hold back a smile. "And I am sure you will also enjoy learning more about him," Garland said with a chuckle as he continued to tease his little sister. The now extremely red-faced girl had finally had enough of her brother's teasing and decided to hit back. "Like the way you have been learning about Lady Leonette?" she asked with a smirk. Although it surprised her when her teasing only elicited a chuckle from her brother. "That is actually why I wanted to go riding with you today. I want to talk about Lady Leonette with you." His tone was serious but with a smile. "I spoke with Father a couple of days ago. He has agreed to allow me to marry Lady Leonette," he said with one of the brightest smiles she had ever seen come from Garland. He did not object. "I know you two are very fond of each other, and you know I love Lady Leonette, but I would have imagined he would have wanted you to marry someone from a more powerful family like a Bracken or a Royce," Margaery asked, happy but curious about her brother's new betrothal. "There are some benefits being a second son. One of those benefits is being allowed to marry for love if the woman is of a high enough station. He knows I love Leonette, and she does come from a powerful enough family that he does not see it as a bad thing letting me follow my heart," Garland said. There was a deep happiness in his eyes that Margaery admired. "I am so happy for you, Garland. You know how much I love Lady Leonette, and I am so happy she will be my sister. You have my full blessing," Margaery said, knowing Lady Leonette and Garland were madly in love with one another. He appreciated her blessing and he grabbed Margaery's hand as they rode. "I pray every day that you, Loras, and Willers find as much happiness as I have found. You each deserve to feel loved and be happy for the rest of your days," he said, looking into Margaery's eyes. Garland loved his siblings so dearly and genuinely did want the best for them. His hopes for her brought her back to Robb once again. Maybe the old gods were guiding her north for more than just curiosity. She put the thought out of her mind for the time being. It was Garland's day and she wanted to celebrate with him. Although a young Robb Stark would be at the back of her mind the whole rest of the day. Chapter 7, A Proposal. Chapter text. It had been almost a year since they had been writing one another, and their letters had turned from curiosity to something else now. Something that he enjoyed very much. After maybe the 10th letter they stopped talking about the North and its customs and began speaking about one another. Their likes, dislikes, what makes them happy. They talked about family and friends and everything in between. Hundreds of miles separated them, but, in their letters, they were right next to each other. Robb found himself praying for Margaery every day, and he found himself thinking about her all the time. They had sent each other pictures sketched by castle stewards of what each other looked like. Her picture made him believe all the rumors he had been told about her beauty. She must have truly been the most beautiful girl in the Seven Kingdoms. Robb sat at his desk reading the newest letter from Margaery. He already had a book pressed full of her letters to him, and each one made him smile more than the one before. "My dearest Robb, I am glad to hear you enjoyed my last letter. I have to say the marriage between my brother and Lady Leonette would have been made even brighter had you been there. I hope I am not too forward in wishing that you would come and visit me here in Highgarden. Gods be good, I hope to visit you in Winterfell sometime soon. I was happy to hear that Lady Sansa and Lord Jon are getting along better these days. I know you said it had been rough for a couple of years, but I am glad she is beginning to see him like you do. I do sometimes envy you. Having sisters is something I have never truly gotten to experience. When you talk about your siblings, I can sense the love in every word, and it gives me so much joy to know how much you care for them. Truth be told, Rob, I feel as though I miss you even though I have never met you. You have made me so happy in this last year, and it has made me want to be close to you. I hope I am not overstepping when I say that you have brought me more joy than I thought was possible, and I haven't even met you. A deep blush colored his face as she began to say words that had already been written on his own heart. I hope my words to you have brought you joy and happiness. Things are still good here in Highgarden, and I hope this letter finds you in good spirits in Winterfell. Please tell your family I send my warmest wishes and that I hope to be able to visit you all someday. With all my joy. Your Margaery. He hated to see the end of the letter but loved their sign-off they had done for one another. She first started it on one of her letter writing your Margaery as if to say a part of her belonged to him. He had responded with your Rob, and the two had never stopped since. He decided to write his response to her letter later that day. His mother had asked him to accompany her on a walk this morning around the grounds, and he dared not be late. Rob found his mother speaking with Maester Lewin in the Great Hall. The Sewins would be coming to visit that evening, and so was preparing the Great Hall for a small feast. "Ah, Rob, is it time for our walk already?" Lady Catelyn said with some surprise and a smile. "I will leave the rest to you, Lewin." He bowed, and Lady Catelyn walked over to join her son. She wrapped her arm through his and they began to walk. He may have only been 13, but he was already a head taller than her. They walked slowly across Winterfell, speaking about the Sewins, then about father, then the subject changed to Rob's new favorite subject of conversation. "How fares Lady Margaery?" his mother asked with a playful smirk. "She seems to be doing very well. Her brother Garland recently got married. I am sure I told you that," he said somewhat absent-mindedly as his thoughts went to her once again. Catelyn smiled at her son's behavior. "What do you think of her, Rob?" Rob was all too happy to tell his mother all he thought about Margaery. "She is smart, with sharp wit and a good heart. I think she genuinely enjoys the letters I send her. Margaery, I mean Lady Margaery, cares so much for her family, and I think ours as well. She asks how we all are, and when I tell her about problems that I have, she gives me advice. So, I would say I think very highly of her." He said the last part with a smile as blush dusted his cheeks. Catelyn smiled even more at this. "And how does she make you feel?" This question caught him off guard, and he almost stopped walking but quickly regained his composure to answer his mother's question. "She makes me happy, Mother. I think that she has made me happier than any other girl I've ever spoken with, and I haven't even met her. Every letter I get from her makes me excited, and I cannot wait to hear from her again. I honestly wish I did not have to wait as long as I did to receive her letters," Rob said with a chuckle. He was being honest. His mother had always been a close confidant of his, and he felt like he could share these sorts of things with her. "Rob, I must ask you a serious question, and I need you to be honest with me. But you also must not get overly excited at this. Do I have your word?" Catelyn asked, stopping her son as they had been walking. "Of course," Rob affirmed as he stopped to face his mother. They had made their way to the Godswood by this point. "I am sure you know that one day you must marry, and it is more than likely that whomever you marry will be chosen for you by your father. Your father and I did not choose one another, but we have come to love each other deeply. However, I can very clearly see that Lady Margaery has already stolen your heart. If it were any other girl, I would tell you to bury your feelings, as it would be your duty to leave her behind to marry someone else. But it seems the gods have blessed you, because Margaery is of a high enough station that a match between you and her is very much a possibility," Lady Catelyn said, gripping her son's shoulders. Rob thought he might be in a dream. He knew his duty would always come before his heart, but the gods may have seen fit to make his duty something cared about with his whole heart. Rob, do I have your leave to speak with your father about the possibility of matching you with Margaery? I would never make this suggestion behind your back or without your consent. I also want to make sure that this is something that would make you happy. It is very rare that people like us get to marry someone we already care deeply about. I am one of the lucky few women who fell in love with their husbands after getting married. But you may already have a head start, and if I can give you that happiness I would do it in a heartbeat. Catelyn's tender words touched Rob's heart and made him tear up slightly. Yes, I would like that very much, was all he could muster before he brought his mother into a deep hug. When they broke, she looked at him with a smile. Now, I cannot promise your father will say yes, and I cannot promise Lord Tyrell will say yes. Please do not get your hopes too high. I hope it all works out for you, but if not, know that you will be loved by many girls throughout your life, she said, placing her hands on either side of his face. I know, mother, and thank you for everything you are doing. It means the world to me, Rob said with a smile as she took her hands from his face. Now go riding or spar with Jon. Get this off your mind while I go and speak with your father. She smiled as Rob walked away. Lady Catelyn knew where she needed to go next. Her husband was in his study. He had just heard petitions earlier that day and was signing orders when she knocked at his door. Enter, Lord Eddard said, looking to see who his visitor was. He stood up when his wife walked in the door. How are you doing, Cat? He said with a warm smile. She gave her own smile back to him with just as much warmth. I am well. Preparations for the Sowins are going well, but I had another matter I wanted to speak with you about, Ned, she said as she took a seat across from him. Ned sat back down and looked at her curiously. What is it, my love? He asked curiously. Cat smiled. This would either be a very pleasant conversation or a very difficult one. I wanted to speak with you about Rob and Lady Margaery. What about them? Ned asked, leaning forward a bit in his chair. Does this have to do with their letters? Yes, and something else. I am sure you know Rob is very taken with Lady Margaery, and if Rob is right, she is taken with him as well. You can see it when he talks about her, and I think that he may be falling in love with her, Cat said cautiously as Ned listened intently. Well, he is a boy and she is a charming girl, if I understand correctly. But if you are asking for me to stop him from writing her, I just do not see how that would be right of me. Ned leaned back somewhat in his chair. He had hoped that his wife would be on board with the idea of Rob being matched with Margaery and was unsure where her hesitation was coming from. No, I would never think to stop them. Quite the opposite, in fact. I think there is an opportunity here, Ned. She is from a powerful family and she is rumored to be a great beauty. I've heard she is intelligent and kind. Ned, she sounds like all we could ever hope for in a bride for our son, Catelyn said, reaching forward to grab Ned's hand. There she was. His caring Southron wife did want Rob and Margaery to be matched just for different reasons than his own. Ned had really only thought about the match being a political one, but was glad to hear that Margaery actually made Rob happy. She would make a wonderful bride for him, he said, smiling and taking Catelyn's hand in his own. So, should I write to Lord Tyrell with our proposal, or should you? He asked jokingly. He knew it would be him that wrote the letter, but he loved seeing Catelyn smile. She walked around the desk to where he was seated, and as Ned stood up, she wrapped her arms around his neck and stood on her toes. I love you, she said before laying a sweet kiss on his lips. As they separated, Ned smiled and said, I love you too. You have always cared so much for our children. Rob would be blessed to have a wife half as caring as you are. If what I understand about Margaery is true, she may be just as caring and kind as you believe I am, she said with a laugh. Rob had been summoned by his father to his study that evening. He walked in the open door, seeing his father and mother speaking near the hearth on the left side of the room. Rob, go ahead and close the door, Lord Eddard said. The Sowins had arrived, and after a small, tame feast, they retired to their quarters. That was when Rob was summoned from his chambers. So, as I understand, your mother has already spoken with you about what she asked me today, he said with a smile. Rob nodded his head, almost too excited to speak. The girl he had gotten to know through only letters over the past year may become his wife, but their fate was in his father's hands at the moment. Is this what you want, son? Would a match with Margaery Tyrell make you happy? Lord Stark asked him seriously. Robb looked to his mother and then back to his father. Yes. His response was short but true. It was in that moment that Lord and Lady Stark both began to smile. Then I will write to Lord Tyrell and give our proposal to him. Write Margaery another letter, one that can be given to her in the event that her father says yes to the proposal. In my proposal letter I will tell him to give her the letter only if he approves of the match. If he does not, Robb, it may be best to stop writing her. Please do not get your hopes up, but know that I will do my best to make this happen. Eddard said with a serious look in his eyes. He did not want his son's heart to be broken. I will, father. Robb stopped and then stepped forward and gave his father a hug. And thank you for this, he said as he stepped out of his father's arms and made his way for the door. His feelings for Margaery and their future were going to be in Lord Tyrell's hands. All Robb could do now was pray and hope. He sat at his desk. It was lit only by candlelight and he began to write. All of his feelings for Margaery were being put down on paper. If Lord Tyrell agreed to the match, he wanted Margaery to know exactly how he felt for her. Chapter 8, A Betrothal. Notes. So another 2-chapter day. This chapter was kinda short and worked well with the last chapter. Also, the following chapter will almost double the length of the fic, so look forward tomorrow to seeing that. Chapter text. Margaery had been in the library when she received the summons from her father. She was unsure of what it was for. She was slightly worried as she had been expecting a letter from Robb soon, but it had not arrived when she would have normally expected it to. She knocked on the doors to his study and was asked to come in. Her father was behind his desk while her grandmother sat in one of the 2 chairs across from him. Both smiled at her as Lady Olenna motioned for her to sit down. Margaery thought she detected pride in her grandmother's smile. Margaery, I received a letter from Lord Stark this morning. It seems the Stark boy is very fond of you and it would seem to have made quite a good impression on Lord and Lady Stark. Her father said, motioning to one open letter with a still sealed one next to it. I am glad that I have left a good impression on them. She stopped and blushed before continuing. And I am very fond of Lord Robb as well. Her grandmother smiled and picked up where Mace left off. Lord Stark proposed a match between you and Robb Stark, and your father is inclined to accept the match. Margaery's world came to a stop. Was this a dream? She had grown to care so deeply for Robb over the last year. She kept everything he sent her. Every blue winter rose had already been dried and pressed so she could keep them forever, and she kept the drawing of Robb in the top drawer of her desk. Now she could be his bride. A boy she had never met but had grown to feel as though she was meant to be with. Truly, father? Margaery asked, still pushing down her excitement and joy as to not get overly exuberant. I believe the match makes sense, but we wanted to know what you thought of it all. You know Lord Robb better than either of us. We wish to know if you think you would be happy with him. Mace Tyrell affirmed. Yes. She said almost too quickly. He does make me happy. He is honorable and kind and loves his siblings. Robb is quick of wit and extremely intelligent, but he also makes me feel more joy than I ever thought anyone could make me feel. Margaery said, eyes dashing between Mace and Olenna. I hear he is rather handsome as well. Lady Olenna said with a smirk. Then we are all in agreement. Margaery, I will write back to Lord Stark with our acceptance. This was sent for you. It was attached to this letter and is from Robb. Lord Stark wrote to give this to you if I was inclined to accept his offer. Mace said, happily handing her the sealed letter. Thank you, father. Margaery said, standing, moving around the desk to hug him. She then came back around and hugged her grandmother, knowing she had no small part in getting her father to accept the proposal. Now Margaery, this does mean you will need to travel to Winterfell rather soon. I believe it would be prudent for you to go north at the turn of the new year. Lady Olenna said. We can make plans for you prior to you leaving and we will join you a month before the ceremony. Margaery was almost jumping for joy when she heard this. When will I be married to him? I would expect no more than half a year after you arrive in Winterfell, my child. Olenna said, seemingly already having everything planned out. Margaery would be 14 by then. She never thought she would get married this young, but if it was to be with anyone, she was happy it was with Rob. Her father and grandmother shooed her away, sending the girl to read her letter from Rob in private. Her betrothed. She reached her chambers, closed the door and sat on her bed. She had a feeling she was going to read and reread this letter until she fell into a deep and happy sleep. My dearest Margaery. If you are reading this, then I am about to become the happiest man who ever lived. If you are reading this, it means your father has accepted my father's proposal of a match between us. I want you to know nothing made me happier than to hear my father say he intended to betroth me to you. I hope that this news will bring you as much joy as it has brought me. You have already brought me so much happiness in the year that you and I have been writing, and now I get to spend my whole life getting to know you. Getting to love you. I want to save my other words until I see you. Whenever that may be, I hope it is at least soon. With all my love. Your Rob. It was shorter than many of his past letters but did not lack for feeling. It made her tear up. This was the man that had made her so happy, and now he would be hers forever. He cared so deeply for her and her for him. She must have read it several hundred times before leaving for Winterfell. She would leave from Old Town and arrive in White Harbor before riding to Winterfell. The journey would be long, but it was the end that would make it all worth it. Chapter 9, The Warmest Welcome. Notes. Here we go. Biggest chapter so far. Margaery meets the Starks. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. The news of the betrothal between Robb and Margaery was not only the talk of the Reach and the North but of the whole kingdom. Robert Baratheon had even written to Winterfell sending his congratulations. Some Northerners were skeptical about the match between a Southern lady and their Northern heir, but Robb knew Margaery would bring them to her side in no time. The houses of the Reach generally supported the match, although there were some disgruntled petty lords, but none of the more powerful noble families had any objections. House Stark was rich and powerful, and that is all that really mattered to them. Robb was nervous. More nervous than he had ever been in his whole life. He stood there on his father's right-hand side. Sansa, Arya, and Bran were to Robb's right in that order, and on his father's left stood his mother, who was holding the 2-year-old Rickon, and Jon stood on her left. Theon stood directly behind Robb, and it seemed all the Winterfell's guards and servants had been called into the yard. All of them in their best furs, dresses, and doublets. Suddenly, Jory Castle came through the gate, followed by around 10 more guards, and then a large green and gold wheelhouse. Robb felt his chest tighten and he had to catch a gasp in his lungs. She was here. Just beyond the door of that wheelhouse was the girl he had grown to care for. He also smiled to himself a little. This was both in excitement and knowing that Margaery wanted nothing more than to get out of that wheelhouse. Margaery had always told him about how she loved riding and hated palanquins and wheelhouses. Following the wheelhouse came around 20 more Tyrell household guards. Margaery felt the wheelhouse come to a stop and both cursed and thanked the gods. Had she not cared about how she looked when she arrived, she would have simply ridden a horse, but she wanted more than anything for Robb to see her at her best when they first met. Now that she was here, she prayed to the gods that he liked what he saw. This boy that she had cared so much about, that she couldn't wait to marry, was right outside the wheelhouse door. Her furs had kept her warm against the northern cold, but she loved it. The sun was out, yet there was still a chill on the air. An almost familiar chill. One of the servants went to where the wheelhouse door was and pulled on some latches. The bottom half of the door swung to the ground, creating steps for Margaery and her handmaidens to walk down. The next door was opened, and it was then that Robb realized he was holding his breath. As the door swung open, a girl more beautiful than anything Robb could imagine stepped out into the open. Her dress was a deep blue with silver leaves embroidered on it, and her cloak was a matching blue with white fur around her neck and shoulders running down the sides and meeting at the bottom. She took the servant's hand as she gracefully walked down the steps, holding up her skirts. Her handmaidens followed her, but Robb's eyes never left her. Her eyes met Robb's, and there was a moment of excitement as she stepped forward. He was more handsome than she could have ever dreamed. He was taller than her by over a head, and she had never seen eyes as beautiful as his. They were like sea blue crystals, and his hair was a beautiful dark shade of auburn. Auburn hair. The color was so familiar to her, and it brought her a sense of comfort and joy, but she could not quite place her finger on why. Her eyes were so familiar to Rob, but he could not identify where he thought he had seen her before. Rob and Margaery were brought out of their thoughts when Lord Eddard took a step forward and greeted Margaery. "Lady Margaery, welcome to Winterfell. We have heard so much about you. It is a pleasure to meet you," he stated as Margaery remembered her manners and curtsied to the tall lord in front of her. Lord Eddard was tall like Rob was, and his smile was warm. "Thank you, Lord Stark," she said, rising from her curtsy. "The pleasure is all mine. I have wanted to come to Winterfell for so long, and I am infinitely happy that it is under these circumstances," she said, politely smiling up at Lord Stark. He turned and motioned to his wife, and Lady Catelyn handed Rickon to Jon to hold and walked up next to her husband. "May I introduce my wife, Lady Catelyn Stark?" Lord Stark said, looking radiantly at his wife. Margaery curtsied again in front of the auburn-haired beauty. Lady Stark had a sort of motherly beauty that also was accompanied by a sense of strength. "Lady Stark, it is so wonderful to meet you," Margaery said, rising again. "And it is wonderful to meet you as well, Lady Margaery," Lady Stark said with an even warmer smile than her husband. "I had heard tales of your beauty, and for once gossip was right. You truly are a beautiful rose to behold." Margaery blushed at her future good mother's compliment. Lord Stark finally turned to Rob and motioned him over. Rob mustered up the courage of the Kings of Winter and walked over. He wanted to throw his arms around Margaery, but protocol dictated that he restrain himself to an extent. "At least for now. Lady Margaery, may I introduce my son and heir, Rob?" Eddard said with a deep sense of pride. She watched him walk up to her. He had a dimpled smile that made her blush as she looked on her betrothed. Margaery remembered her manners and curtsied again. Rob could see she was just as nervous as he was. She must have been blushing more than he was, but he thought it was cute. He reached down without being prompted and gently took her hand in his. "My lady, it is the greatest pleasure of my life to meet you," he said as he kissed her hand. Was she going to faint? Is this what it felt like to live in a fairy tale? Questions for later. Right now, she was being greeted by who must be the most charming man she had ever met. "The pleasure is entirely mine, my lord. I hope that I am pleasing to you," she said, a bit nervous but knowing that he would respond positively. "My lady, you are the single most beautiful woman I have ever laid my eyes on," Rob said with an all too pleasing smirk. He was good. He was very good at this. Margaery had to stifle a noise in her throat. Had she not, she is unsure of what sound may have come out. A gasp. A moan. She didn't know, but what she was sure of was that the man staring back at her was kind and had shown her every courtesy that could be expected of him and more. She returned his smirk with her own bright smile, their eyes meeting again. "My lady, if I may, I have a gift for you," Rob said, motioning to Theon, who walked forward and handed Rob a small box. "I hope you find them to your liking," Rob said as he unlatched the small box to reveal a set of teardrop-shaped sapphire earrings set in beautiful platinum. Margaery couldn't help but place her hand over her mouth at the gorgeous gift. "My lord, these are beautiful," she said, running a finger over the gemstones. "I love them. I will have to try them on later," she said as Rob closed the box and handed it back, this time to a female servant. "Have those taken to my lady's chambers," Rob ordered gently and with a smile. She was engrossed in her husband-to-be. He was already showering her with gifts and compliments. She noted that the gift was an expensive one. Giving it to her as a simple welcoming gift was a grand gesture. "If it pleases my lady, allow me to introduce you to my siblings," he said, and she nodded in approval. Rob removed both of his gloves in a sign of respect before he took her right hand gently with his own and placed his left hand on her back between where her shoulder blades met. His touch was gentle, but she could feel his large calloused hands guiding her. She couldn't help but feel safe when she touched him. He let go of her right hand and dropped his left hand, much to her disapproval, when they stopped in front of a beautiful young girl. Her hair was a bright auburn, more striking than Rob's. "Lady Margaery, this is my sister Sansa Stark." Rob motioned with his hand as both girls curtsied at one another. Sansa was a few inches taller than Margaery but still shorter than Rob. "Lady Margaery, it is such a pleasure to meet you," Sansa said with an excited look in her eye. She hadn't stopped talking about how romantic Rob's story with Margaery was, much to her brother's chagrin. But what Rob did appreciate was the almost blind love his sister had for his betrothed. Sansa was young and silly, but she had always been more predisposed to southern fashion and customs. He was sure that the two would get along great. "It is such a blessing to meet you, Lady Sansa. You are as beautiful as your brother described you to be. I am so pleased you and I will be sisters soon," Margaery said with a genuine smile. She wanted to hug the girl, she seemed so sweet, but again, protocol and manners dictated otherwise. There would be time for affection later. Rob next motioned in the direction of the one person who might cause some trouble today. Arya was not smiling as she looked up at Margaery. Margaery had been prepared for the little dark-haired girl. Rob had already given her plenty of warning that Arya had the north in her veins, and that meant she was not as trusting of southerners despite her own southern blood. "This is my sister Arya," Rob said, praying to any gods that would listen to let this go quick and let this go well. Arya gave a short curtsy while Margaery gave her normal full curtsy. That's when it happened. Arya spoke her first words to Margaery and Rob thought the world was going to end. "So, you're Margaery?" the little girl said, looking up at Margaery. The tone wasn't impolite, merely curious, but the words were inappropriate, at least in this setting. Rob thought his mother, or the Septa, might throw Arya down a flight of stairs for it. But to his utter joy, Margaery saved the day. "I am, and I have heard quite a lot about you. Your brother tells me you are excellent with a sword. I hope to watch you spar with him in the yard. Perhaps you could teach me a thing or two about sword fighting. I would be very honored to learn from you," Margaery said delightfully. There was no sign of treachery or jesting, and the way Margaery had just handled Arya left everyone stunned. Everyone realized Margaery was not just a pretty flower. She was quick on her feet and knew how to handle a new and uncertain situation. In Rob's eyes it was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. Although Arya continued to stare at Margaery for another half-second before smiling up at Margaery. "I think we can make a swordswoman out of you, Lady Margaery," Arya said with a dimpled smirk which gained an equal smirk from Margaery. "I look forward to it, Arya." She left off the lady. Rob had told her all she needed to know about Arya to know calling Arya a lady would have made the little wolf just a bit too angry. Rob, seeing this moment of closure, almost quickly ushered Margaery to the little boy standing next to Arya. "This is my younger brother, Bran," Rob said, his brother smiling up at Margaery. He bowed his head slightly while Margaery curtsied. "It is a pleasure to meet you, my lady." Bran was 6, about to turn 7, and his mother had told him what to say and how to act, but Margaery saw his smile was genuine. "The pleasure is mine, Lord Bran. I have heard you are rather adventurous." Margaery crouched gracefully until she was at eye level with Bran. "You must take me on one of your adventures with you, but don't tell anyone, it will be our secret," she whispered with a smile. Bran giggled and nodded his head as Margaery stood back up, placing a finger over her lips as if to tell him to keep the secret even though everyone had heard it. She seemed to make everyone around her smile. Rob had not even gotten the chance to speak with her all that much, and she was already becoming more and more endearing to him. He smiled as he walked her over to Jon, who was still holding Rickon. As they walked over, Lady Catelyn smiled and Jon handed Rickon to her. She needed to manage the interaction between her future good daughter and her wild son. "My lady, this is my younger brother, Rickon," Rob said, knowing that the boy really could not understand what was going on. He was 2 and really only had just recently started putting words together into small sentences. But he was wild and loved running around and playing in dirt. Rob was glad his mother was there to manage the interaction. "Can you say, 'Hello, my lady'?" Lady Catelyn prompted the bright-eyed boy in her arms. "Hello, my lady," Rickon almost yelled, but with a smile. It wasn't entirely intelligible, but it was sweet, and it made Margaery giggle. Rob would never get used to how wonderful her laugh was. "Hello, Rickon, I'm so happy to meet you," she said with a small curtsy and a smile. Their interaction was short. Half because there was not much more to say to a 2-year-old, half because Rob wanted to introduce Margaery to the sibling whom he was closest with. Jon stood there with a small smile on his face. Of all his siblings, Jon was happiest for Rob and Margaery. He was not always the most expressive, but he loved Rob and was so grateful for the happiness Margaery gave to him. Lady Margaery, may I introduce my brother Jon Stark? There were a number of things that Robb did to make sure that Jon felt more a part of the family. First, he never referred to Jon as his half-brother. Second, he used his true-born name as often as he could. His mother had begged his father to give him a true name, to make him a Stark. She had kept her promise and been a true mother to him. Jon was loved and this was his family. A family Margaery would soon become a part of. My lady, welcome to Winterfell. I hope the cold does not bother you too much. Jon gave a full bow of his head as Margaery curtsied. Your home is beautiful, Lord Jon, and I must say that I do not think I will ever be cold with such warm company around. Margaery said, partially as a gesture to Jon, partially as a gesture to the whole Stark family for the warm welcome she had just received. Lord Eddard interjected at this point. Lady Margaery, I will have my servants take your things up to the chambers we have prepared for you in the Great Keep. At that a small army of servants began unloading bags from the storage compartment in the wheelhouse as Lady Margaery's handmaidens went to work guiding them on which bags were which. Lady Catelyn added. There will be breakfast in the Great Hall in a half-hour. If you would like, I'll have Robb show you to the guest house, so you may freshen up. I made sure to have everything you might need put there for you as a temporary resting place while your possessions are moved to your chambers. She gestured in the direction of the guest house. Margaery realized that being placed in the Great Keep was a gesture of acceptance in and of itself. The Starks could have set her up in the guest house, but Margaery was about to become family and they did not intend to sequester her away from the family. Margaery nodded. That would be lovely. Thank you, Lady Stark. Margaery said with a smile. Lady Stark. A title that she would one day be addressed with. It made her happy in a way that she had not expected. Robb offered Lady Margaery his arm and the young couple began walking towards the guest house. It was a fair distance away but the two kept a leisurely pace. Once they were out of earshot, Robb finally broke the silence between them, placing a hand on her own that was laced through his arm. Your dress is beautiful. The color suits you, my lady. Robb said, noting the colors being more like that of House Stark than House Tyrell. Thank you, my lord. I think the colors suits me more than green and gold. She said, smiling. My lady, you have no idea how happy I am to get to meet you. I cannot remember ever smiling as much as I have this morning. He said, continuing to beam at Margaery as they happily enjoyed each other's touch. I think I might have some idea, my lord, as I am experiencing the exact same happiness as you are right now. She said, smiling right back at Robb as he unloosed her hand from his arm and opened the front door to the guest house for her. She stepped in with Robb following behind her. Your family is wonderful, my lord. She said as he made up the distance behind her and guided her to her temporary washroom. I can tell they already adore you. You handled Arya incredibly well. Also, if it please my lady, call me Robb. Robb said with a smile as he led her through another door. Well, if that is what you wish me to call you, then I insist you call me Margaery. She said, turning to face him, a playful smirk playing on her lips. It is what you called me in our letters, and I do believe I like the sound of my name on your lips. She said, never breaking eye contact with him. There was a tension between them now. He wanted to take her lips right there, but the washroom in the guest house did not seem to be the right place. Of course, Margaery. He looked down at his feet, now smiling and blushing. She studied him curiously, wondering what was going on in his head before he continued. I am so happy you are here. His eyes came back up to meet her own. I cannot believe that the gods have blessed me with someone like you. She cut him off when she stepped forward and wrapped her arms gently around his neck and pulled him in for a warm embrace. She smelled sweet and her touch was soft. Her furs tickled against his clean-shaven jawline, but even they were soft. Robb wrapped his arms around her waist, and she felt like she was spinning. He smelled of pine and clean furs. His touch was gentle and strong. His arms made her feel safer than she had ever felt in her life, and his body was warm. He was tall and she felt him almost tower over her as her face was engulfed in his furs. This was paradise. It had to be, as she felt she could stay here forever. Both blushed, but the embrace communicated so much more affection than either could communicate in words right now. They stayed that way for a few more moments before breaking. This time Rob decided to be bold, and as they separated, he placed his forehead against her own. A deep blush danced across her cheeks when Rob looked her in the eyes and smiled. "I don't think I am ever going to get tired of seeing you blush," Rob said at just above a whisper. His voice was rough when he said it, and it made her skin tingle. His northern accent was becoming intoxicating to her, and she was not sure how much more of this she was going to be able to take from him. "And I don't think I will ever get tired of you talking to me like that." Now that was bold on her part. She realized too late, and Rob chuckled at her deepening blush. He pulled his forehead off of her own and leaned into her ear. "Well then, I'll make sure never to stop," he said in the same gruff tone, only lower this time. His lips danced on her ears as he said it. She gripped his furs tightly. Damn this boy. He was already getting to her in all the right ways. She even had to stifle a moan that threatened to escape her lips. He pulled back and eased out of her grasp, letting his hands and then fingers linger on hers for a moment longer before stepping back towards the door. "I'll be waiting out in front. When you are ready, come down and I will walk you over the Great Hall," he said with a smile as he let go of her hand and walked out the doors. Margaery had practically melted into the floor. Her future husband was already figuring out what made her tick, and she loved every second of it. The poor girl had to fan her face with her hands to calm the blush down. She fixed any stray hair, touched up the light makeup she had on, and straightened her dress before walking down the stairs. Her rather proud husband-to-be was out front waiting, smirking. His smirk was dimpled and was honestly incredibly attractive to her. Although she knew he only wore the smirk because he left her a blushing mess before he left. She would have to get him back for that at some point. "May I?" he asked, offering his arm to her. "You may," she said delightfully. As the two walked towards the Great Hall, servants, guards, and other people who lived and worked within the castle walls gave them every courtesy as they walked by. The people here were already taking extremely well to the new couple. Margaery had been worried that Northerners would not like her all that well because she was a Southerner. She came to realize that the people in Winterfell followed their lord's lead, and because he had taken well to Margaery, so would they. "I will have to show you the Godswood before tonight, if that is all right with you," Rob spoke up. Margaery had told him about her story with the old gods and her brother. He knew she would not mind seeing Winterfell's ancient Godswood. She was actually probably looking forward to it. He knew she worshipped the old gods like he did, although he did not know that she had experienced that power of the old gods as he had. "I would like that very much. Is there going to be a feast tonight?" she asked with genuine curiosity. It was mid-morning and she was looking forward to her first real northern feast. "My future wife arrives in Winterfell. That is an occasion that practically demands a feast." The couple chuckled at Rob's small jest. "Your family has made me feel so welcome here. I have been so excited to see every part of this castle with you, Rob," she said, gripping his arm tighter. The two made easy conversation for the final minute or so walk over to the Great Hall where the Stark family had already begun. The hall was massive and filled with natural light from outside. The sun lit the hall up beautifully and the walls felt warm to her. This must have been from the hot spring water piped throughout Winterfell. She noticed the Starks had shed their furs and a servant came over to her. She felt Rob's hands on her shoulders as she undid her cloak. He lifted it off her body and handed it to the servant before removing his own. Rob could now see the full splendor of her dress. It was form-fitting. The dress had long sleeves and curved down, allowing some her tanned chest to be shown without exposing her cleavage. The dress curved down just a bit further in the back. Her shoulders were covered, but the crook where her neck met her shoulders was temptingly exposed, much to Rob's delight. The dress went all the way to the ground and dragged slightly behind her. Catelyn was the first to notice the couple and walked over to them with a bright smile. "Did you find everything you needed in your temporary washroom?" Lady Catelyn questioned in a motherly way, taking Margaery's hand in her own. "Yes, Lady Stark. You all have been so kind to me, I feel right at home," Margaery said, giving a friendly squeeze to her future good mother's hand. "Please Margaery, call me Cat or Catelyn. There is no more need for formalities." Catelyn took both of her hands now and looked at Margaery rather seriously, but then smiled. "You are going to be a part of this family and I want to make sure you feel you belong to it. Margaery smiled at the sweet gesture. Thank you, Catelyn. I so greatly appreciate your hospitality. I am a long way from Highgarden, but I am not sure I have ever felt as warm and happy as I do now. Margaery said with love in her heart. This was her family just as much as her family in Highgarden. A servant walked over to Margaery and Robb with a plate with 2 glasses on them. The liquid in them was a transparent green and Robb took his glass without question. It is tea from the tea leaves we have grown in the glass gardens. Give it a try, he said, handing her her own glass of the tea. She lifted it to her lips and gave it a taste. A rush flavor tingled across her tongue and her eyes lit up. This is delicious. I'm surprised you are able to grow tea leaves this far north. Sansa walked over at this point with her own glass. The glass gardens make it easier to grow them. I am sure they are not as good or full as the ones you must have in Highgarden though. Sansa said, taking a polite sip. No, this is easily just as good as what we have in the south. Margaery said with genuine surprise. The north was going to continue to surprise her, she thought. The food is not half bad either. Robb said, gesturing over to a serving girl who came walking in their direction. I hope you do not mind having your first northern breakfast a little late in the morning. Robb said as the serving girl reached them. My lady, what can I put on your plate this morning? We have bacon and eggs cooking, and we also have warm potato slices and a selection of fruits and vegetables. The serving girl politely asked with a warm smile. All of it would all be wonderful. I'll have my eggs scrambled and a small sampling of both the fruit and vegetables. I would like to give them all a try. Thank you. Margaery responded as the serving girl curtsied and quickly went about her work as Robb placed a hand on the exposed skin on her back under her long hair, guiding her towards a seat left open for her. He pulled the seat out and she gracefully lowered herself into it. His hand glided across her shoulder and she gave it a squeeze in appreciation for pulling out her chair. Robb took his own seat next to her across from his father. She was placed directly across from Lady Catelyn. To Margaery's right was Sansa, and across from Sansa next to Catelyn sat Arya. Jon sat next to Robb and Bran across from Jon next to Lord Eddard. Rickon was not there. Likely Lady Catelyn was having him tended to by a nurse while she took time to get to know Margaery. You will have to forgive Rickon. He gets rather restless this time of the morning, and I wanted to make sure we got the chance to get to know you a little bit without too much interruption. I imagine you will be meeting quite a lot of people tonight. Lady Catelyn said with a smile and a wave. We are just a bit greedy for your time, it seems. No, not at all, Catelyn. I want to get to know each one of you as well. Margaery responded, taking another sip from her juice. Was the road good to you, Lady Margaery? Sansa asked, still maintaining a degree of formality. It was. Also, you may call me Margaery if I can call you Sansa. Margaery proposed with a smile. Of course. Sansa responded with glee. How fares your father, Margaery? Lord Eddard asked. I think the last time I saw him was outside the walls of Pykenir 10 years ago. He is doing well, Lord Stark. The formalities remained with Eddard. Addressing the wife of a lord or the daughter of one was one thing, but the lord himself deserved her full deference. After she married Robb, he may perhaps ask her to call him father, but until such time he was Lord Stark to her. He was overjoyed to hear from you and receive your proposal. I am glad to see the wounds that divided our houses during Robert's rebellion have healed so nicely, she said with a degree of caution. Robert's rebellion was a sore subject depending on the house you mentioned it to. As am I. Lord Stark replied. Your father did his duty in that war, and that was all that could be asked of him. He is an honorable man. Lord Stark was extending a courtesy to Lord Tyrell. He never thought much of the man's intelligence, but he kept his oath to the crown, and he surrendered to save his men when Eddard surrounded them at Storm's End. A move that Lord Stark had come to respect. Your brother is Sir Garland the Gallant, right? Arya asked, abruptly changing the subject. I hear that he spars with 2 other swordsmen when he trains. Arya said. Margaery also noticed Bran listening intently to the tales of her knight brother. 3. Margaery said, and then paused, watching Arya's eyes grow bigger. He usually spars with 3 of his squires at once. Sometimes one of them will be another knight. Margaery said, looking over to Bran, who was paying closer attention to the story than even Arya. He must be quite the knight. Jon spoke up, looking over to Margaery. I hope he will allow us to train with him when they come and visit for the wedding. Jon said. I'm sure he would be delighted to spar with his brother by law. I've heard you are quite the skilled swordsman in your own right, Jon. Margaery said as servants came into the great hall carrying their food. Well, I have to try and keep up with Robb. Truth be told, he is a faster and stronger swordsman now than I think I may ever be. Jon said with obvious admiration for his brother. You are both well on your way to being storied swordsmen of the North. Lady Catelyn spoke up, pride in her voice, looking at her two sons. Their food had been served and Margaery just watched as the Starks made happy conversation both with her and each other. This is what Northern love looked like. This was her family. She felt a hand lace fingers through her own hand under the table. She looked next to her to see Robb smiling at her. Margaery smiled back, giving his hand a squeeze as she joined back into the conversation, enjoying her meal and enjoying her new home. Once they had finished up with breakfast, one of Margaery's handmaidens informed her that her room had been set up and was ready for her whenever she chose to go to it. Margaery thanked her and sent her away. They were all preparing to go about the rest of their days. Catelyn still had work to do to prepare for the feast that evening, and Lord Eddard had other matters that needed attending to. I hope you don't mind if I steal Margaery away from you all. I promised to show her around the castle after we ate. Robb said politely. Well, some of us may mind, but fine, steal away our southern flower. Eddard said, making an incredibly uncharacteristic joke. All laughed at the small jest. Go, be on your way, and Margaery, please feel free to ask for anything that you might need. Lord Stark said with a warm fatherly smile. Thank you, Lord Stark. I will make sure to ask if there is anything that I need. She rose from her seat and walked towards the door, where a servant brought her and Robb their furs. Robb tied his own while Margaery tied hers. She laced an arm through his and gave him a look that said, lead the way. Once out the door, Robb spoke up. I would imagine you would like to see the Godswood first. Robb said, knowing Margaery all too well. You seem to already be able to read my mind. She said with a playful smirk as the two walked across the yard and then around to where the entrance to the Godswood was. Their conversation was light and easy until Robb pushed open the gate that lead into the Godswood. Margaery almost stopped in her tracks as she entered the walled sanctuary. Her hand flew to cover her mouth and it became clear exactly where she was. This was the Godswood she saw in her childhood. It had the same tall trees and it even smelled the same. The wind danced around her as Robb came up behind her. Are you all right, Margaery? He looked at her with concern. Robb had not expected this reaction. Even tears were beginning to prick at the edges of her eyes. Margaery, what is wrong? He said, stepping in front of her and stroking the back of his hand across her cheek while his other hand laced its fingers through hers. To Robb's surprise, she leaned into his hand, causing him to open it and cup her face as she smiled. I've been here before, or at least my soul has been. She said as she looked him in the eyes, a tear falling from her eye only to be wiped away a second later by Robb. Do you remember the story I told you about my brother and the Godswood at Highgarden? She asked, knowing he knew the story. Robb nodded, concern in his eyes. He almost knew what she was about to say next because he had experienced it all too. I saw you here. She said, her voice happy but quiet. I saw you playing with Jon and then I saw you praying here. She smiled, hoping he did not find her crazy. That was you that I saw back then. Robb's eyes widened as both realized they had been a part of each other's lives longer than they could have ever known. They didn't need to explain to each other any further what had happened between them. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind bristle through the leaves and to his low breath. She felt his forehead against hers and she smiled, opening her eyes. They were full of love and understanding. Robb couldn't stop himself now. The gods had brought her into his life. They had blessed him with a glimpse of her when they were young, and now, he realized they were showing him something he would get to hold the rest of his life. Their eyes fluttered shut and their lips met, and both felt as though they were being lifted off of the ground. The kiss was sweet, a first for both of them. It lasted another second before both pulled back. Margaery placed her forehead against his and wrapped her arms around his neck. You're pretty good at that. she said with pink dusting across her face as she smirked. I would very much like to do that again, he said as he leaned in again. This time the kiss was more urgent but still just as good if not better than the first. Their lips opened and the kiss became more heated. They separated once again, looking at each other deeply. This was what love felt like. What they had was not because of the machinations of mortal men but the will of the gods. One final time they kissed slowly and lovingly before separating. They decided to pray together in front of the heart tree. Neither needed to say what they had prayed for, they both knew what the other had said. They had thanked the gods and continued to ask for their blessing on their love. Margaery and Robb rose and left the Godswood. They spent the rest of the afternoon meeting servants and talking together as they walked the castle grounds. Robb and Margaery would steal kisses when no one was looking and sometimes when they were. Robb walked her to her new chambers. She had been given an extremely spacious chamber large enough to hold all her belongings. Her things were exactly where she would have wanted them to be and her clothes were already hanging in a large closet. There were even flowers in several different vases throughout the room. She had both a large bed and a living area that had a small knee-high table and 2 large couches. Are these chambers to your liking? Robb questioned, hoping she liked them. It is perfect, Robb, thank you, she said, stealing another kiss just inside the doorway. Good, but even if they weren't, you won't be here for all that long really, he said with a smirk. She blushed again, realizing in just 6 months' time she would be moving again. This time into his chambers. I will have to make sure not to get too settled in then, she said playfully as she captured his lips again. She deepened the kiss as their tongues danced against one another. As they broke, Margaery decided to do something a bit more daring. Her teeth gently bit down on Robb's lower lip as she pulled away from him. The lip slipped from between her teeth and Robb's breath hitched. Gods, he whispered as Margaery realized he liked that quite a lot. She smirked. You need to go now, I have to get ready for tonight, she said, her eyes dancing back and forth between his lips and eyes almost begging him to kiss her again. There was a hunger in his eyes she hadn't seen before. It was dangerous, but she continued to fan the flames by letting her lips lightly dance on his before she quickly backed away, leaving him breathless. I'll see you at the feast tonight, my wolf. He could not believe this beautiful woman in front of him. She had teased and pushed him to the edge and now was sending him away. She was very good at what she did. I'll see you at the feast, he said, smirking, attempting to gain back some control of the situation. He walked through the door to her room, blush still on his cheeks. As he closed the door, Margaery sat on her bed before throwing herself back onto it. She put her hands up to her cheeks, feeling how warm they were from her blush, before getting up and calling her handmaidens to attend to her. She enjoyed being pampered by her handmaidens and they giggled to each other as Margaery hummed songs to herself as they brushed her hair and helped her with her makeup. Margaery was so happy she couldn't contain herself. She picked out one of her new favorite dresses that her grandmother had made for her. Lady Olenna had insisted on an entire new wardrobe for Margaery and had near 100 new dresses made for her granddaughter. All of them warm but elegant. The one she was being laced up in now was grey with blue trimming the bodice and waist. The dress had long sleeves like the one she wore earlier, but the cut of the dress was far sultrier and aggressive. The front dipped down to about the middle of her breasts and the back cut down all the way to her mid-back. It was a daring look, but one she thought was likely to keep her as the center of attention and her love's eye solely on her. Her handmaiden brought her clean furs. This one was a grey cloak with white fur. Unlike her blue furs, the actual furs on this cloak dipped down in front of her breast and then up onto her shoulders. She wore her hair half up half down as her light brown curls cascaded down her shoulder. When she was ready, she exited her chambers escorted by 2 of her handmaidens. As she approached the great hall, the sounds of the feast could already be heard. The Starks had not entered yet and were beginning to gather outside. They were all dressed beautifully, but it was Robb who caught her attention. His tunic was black with a black cloak with 2 silver direwolves acting as a clasp in the front. She saw his belt was studded with silver and his cloak was thick velvet cascading down his back. Over the black cloak he wore lush blonde furs that lined a heavier brown cloak. The night may have been cold, but seeing him in all his splendor warmed her heart. She blushed at the first word he said when he saw her. Beautiful. was all he could muster as he stared at some sort of goddess in front of him. She kept becoming more beautiful every time he saw her. He saw her smile, and everything seemed to stop as she greeted him. "Thank you, Rob, you look rather handsome yourself," she said, walking up to him. He finally caught his breath when he saw the smirking beauty in front of him. He took her hand and kissed it. Compliments were showered onto her by Lady Catelyn, Sansa, and even Arya told Margaery she looked pretty. Lord Eddard informed his steward that they were going to make their entrance now. Lord Eddard and his wife entered first, followed by Sansa and Jon, who were followed by Bran and Arya. Rickon was already fast asleep in his bed. Finally, Margaery laced her arm through Rob's. "Are you ready to be welcomed to the north?" Rob asked his bride-to-be. "What? I haven't been already?" she asked playfully, and the two smiled at each other. They walked through the large oaken doors to thunderous cheers. It may have just been the people who lived in the castle, but the cheers felt thunderous as Margaery smiled and walked arm in arm with Rob. She gripped tighter to his arm, and when they reached the high table, one of her handmaidens came and helped her out of her furs as a servant helped Rob with his. The room was in awe of Margaery's beauty, and so was Rob. He stared, but not too long, as all the eyes in the room were still on him and his betrothed. He pulled her seat out next to him before taking a seat between she and his father. Margaery, Rob, Eddard, and Catelyn were on the highest table in the hall, and just below them were the other Stark children facing out looking over the hall. Lord Eddard stood with a glass of wine in his hand. As he looked to begin to speak, the room quieted down. "My friends, you know that I am not one for throwing feasts for any small reason. We are here to celebrate the arrival of someone very special to my house. Not a guest. Calling her guest in our house would be like calling my wife a guest. No, my friends, today we welcomed a daughter into our home." At that a great cheer went up in the hall as Margaery beamed at her future good father's words. "She has quickly charmed each and every one of us, and all I can say is we are better for it. So, Lady Margaery, welcome to Winterfell, and soon I will be able to say welcome to House Stark." At those words the room nearly exploded in cheers as glasses clinked and fists pounded tables in agreement. "To Lady Margaery." He raised his glass and his words were repeated across the hall as happy music began to play. She was not expected to speak tonight, so she would not. She simply raised her wine glass in a toast and walked over to Lord Stark, who opened his arms and embraced his future good daughter. He was followed by Catelyn and the other Stark children as the food was served to them and the drinking began. She must have been introduced to over 100 people. Margaery felt bad for only remembering a few names. She remembered Hodder because of the kind giant's smile and the fact that he only said his name. She also remembered Jane Poole because she was Sansa's best friend. She also noticed Jane did not give her kind looks. Rob had mentioned her offhand in his letters once or twice, but now she could tell the girl had eyes for Rob. It did not make her jealous. Rob obviously did not reciprocate those feelings, but Margaery would have to work on Jane. Margaery did remember Rob saying that Jane was lovesick and fell for almost every boy she met. Likely Jane would not hold marrying Rob against her and they could be friends. Jane's father was the steward of the castle and his name was Veon Poole. She also remembered Theon Greyjoy, Lord Eddard's ward and heir to the Iron Islands. He had been somewhat cold to her when they first met at the feast, and she could only imagine that it was because of the welcoming she received from the Starks. Perhaps he was jealous. Based on what Rob had told her about him, she deduced that he must have felt torn between his Greyjoy blood and his Stark upbringing. Margaery had already met Jory Castle as he led the Stark escort from White Harbor. But now she met his gruff but friendly uncle, Sir Roderick Castle. Rob had watched her with pride as she struck up conversation with what seemed like everyone at the feast. She danced with Jon, Lord Stark, and she even taught Bran a thing or two about dancing. She spared dances with Roderick and Jory Castle, Veon Poole and even a household guard named Harwin. But she danced the most with Rob himself. Slow dances, fast dances, and everything in between. The night was easily one of the most fun of his life, and as the night began to die down, the first to leave were the younger children. Then Sansa and Jane had to be woken up once or twice before their septa left with them. Not because they were drunk, just because they were young, and it was past their bedtime. Finally, Jon tapped Rob on the shoulder and embraced him, saying he was heading off to hit the sack. Jon was probably the most drunk of all of them. Rob had been having some trouble standing, but he could barely understand John, who was smiling like an idiot at every word Rob said. The poor boy had to be carried out by Roderick. Then Rob and Margary decided to call it a night. Rob and Margary said goodnight to his parents and made their way out the door. Accompanied by two of Margary's handmaidens, Rob could do nothing but place a chaste kiss on the back of her hand when he left her at her chambers. If he was being honest with himself, Rob thought this was likely a good thing, as the wine had caused many of his inhibitions to disappear, and by the look in Margary's eyes it had done the same to her. He watched as she closed the door with a smile. He turned around, stumbling somewhat but regaining his balance as he made his way back to his room. He simply allowed his clothes to fall off his body before he crawled into bed. Today had been the first day of the rest of his life, and he could not have been happier. Sleep came easy to both of them that night as they began to count down the days until their forever began. Notes. Hope you all enjoyed the chapter. Some of you may have noticed that I updated the number of parts of this story from 2 to 3 yesterday. Was working on some stuff with part 2 and realized that I had a lot more I wanted to write than could be reasonably contained in the arc of part 2, and so now we have a part 3 in pre-production. Chapter 10, Preparations and Lessons. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Margary had been in Winterfell nearly 4 months, and already she felt more at home here than she had ever felt in the south. The Stark household was taking to her incredibly nicely. Even Theon had begun to look to her as a friend and gave his full approval of her as a companion for Rob. Arya had taken to Margary like an older sister. Margary approved of Arya's less feminine interests like archery and swordplay. Even though Eddard had allowed Arya to practice these, Sansa had always made fun of her sister. She along with Jane would call Arya names and would make fun of her during their embroidery lessons. Margary put an end to this one day when Sansa attempted to insult Arya in front of her. Margary pointed out that it was unbecoming of a lady to insult her own sister. For the first time in Arya's short life, another lady defended her from Sansa. Sansa and Jane were quickly humbled and apologized to Arya. Arya, to her own credit, began enjoying the feminine arts more once Margary was around. She made them fun for Arya, and Sansa even began to help Arya, and their relationship grew. Much to Lady Catelyn's joy, Margary brought Arya into the circle of ladies that lived in Winterfell. To her credit, Sansa took to riding with Margary and went hawking with her when she would accompany Robb, Jon, and Theon. Margary also indulged Sansa's love for southern stories and tales. Margary, Sansa, and Arya all became like sisters to one another. Sansa had never had an older sister to give her advice, and now Margary began to fill that role wonderfully. But it was Lady Catelyn that took the quickest to Lady Margary. For the longest time Catelyn had been the only southern woman in the castle, but now there were two of them. Catelyn had invited Margary to join her for breakfast one morning while the boys and Lord Eddard were out hunting. Lady Margary arrived near one of the several open gardens in Winterfell, and she and Lady Catelyn embraced before taking a seat. "I am so glad you were able to join me this morning, my dear," Lady Catelyn said with a smile as she and Margary sat down. "You have helped me so much prepare for the wedding. I have come to enjoy your company, Cat," Margary said with delight. She and Catelyn had become incredibly comfortable around one another, and they shared quite a lot in common. "Preparing for this wedding has been an absolute joy for me. I always had expected my son would marry a northern girl who would not want me helping with her northern wedding. But you have welcomed my help, and I am so grateful for it," Lady Stark said, taking Margary's hand. "Cat, I am not sure I would even know where to begin planning a wedding in the north. If I may be so bold, you are the closest thing I have to a mother here, and your help with the planning has been a blessing." And it truly had been. Margary had to make plans and decide on what was served at the feast and who would be sat where. It was all a bit overwhelming for her and Robb to attempt to plan. Lady Stark had saved them and had guided Margary through every step of the process like a mother would, and their relationship had blossomed because of it. "It warms my heart to hear you say that, Margary. I have enjoyed planning out everything with you," Lady Stark said. She then looked down at her feet and said, "Margary, you have become so dear to me in such a short time. You have shown how much you love my son and my family. You have brought so much joy to an already happy house," she said with a bright smile, looking back at Margary. "I am not sure I have ever told you this story, but when I asked Eddard to have Jon legitimized, I was afraid. For the longest time I very wrongfully hated that boy for a dishonor he had no part in. I begged the gods to give me strength, to help me be a good mother to him. The gods were good. It was so easy once I decided that I would be his mother. It came almost naturally. I would say that the gods have blessed me with 3 sons and 2 daughters. They also decided to entrust and bless me with a 4th son, John. Now, I feel as though they have entrusted and blessed me with a 3rd daughter. Caitlin said, tears pricking at her eyes. I have no idea what I did to be so blessed, but I am so grateful for all the gods have given to me. She said, now wiping a tear away. Being a mother was obviously the greatest joy of Lady Caitlin's life, and Margaery could see the way she cared about her children and family. Margaery could not help but feel emotion welling up inside her. Margaery stood and crossed the distance between the two, tears in her own eyes. Oh, mother. The word mother came out of her mouth so easily. It felt so right in the moment as she embraced the overjoyed Lady Stark. I feel as though the gods have blessed me with a 2nd mother and father and 5 new siblings, and 1 wonderful husband-to-be. She said, deepening the embrace between them before they broke and returned to their seats. Then you had best continue to call me mother. I will have no daughter of mine calling me anything else. She said sternly with a beautiful smile. Yes, mother. Margaery responded with an equally bright smile. The rest of their breakfast went on with happy conversation until they had finished their meals and were now sitting continuing to talk. I want to begin teaching you about what it is like being the lady of a castle. It is important you understand the role, as once my husband and I are gone it will be your job to maintain the order of this household. Even before he and I pass, a long time from now, gods be good, you will be the 2nd lady of this house. If I am ever away it will be your responsibility to maintain it. I do not mean to put extra responsibility on you, I just know that I would have appreciated someone teaching me before I became Lady of Winterfell. Lady Caitlin said. Margaery knew Cat became Lady of Winterfell the day she came through the gates of the castle for the first time. Margaery was frankly in awe of the force of nature Caitlin must have been forced to become. A Southern Lady of Winterfell with no experience. It must have been so difficult. For her future good mother to offer to teach her was an extremely kind proposition. I would love that, mother. I know there will be a lot of responsibility I have to take on. Having you show me what that is like will be extremely helpful. Margaery said with a smile. Good. I think it would be best if at first you shadowed me throughout my day when you are not busy. When you feel you are ready, I will give you some responsibilities to help ease you into it all. Gods be good, you will not have to take on the role in earnest for many years. Lady Stark said, rising from her chair with Margaery accompanying her. The rest of that day was marked with Margaery shadowing Lady Stark. Many days that would follow would be ones filled with lessons from Lady Stark about her duties and responsibilities. It would have been overwhelming had she attempted to figure out all of this on her own, but with her future good mother she felt she was able to manage. One morning Eddard Stark found himself staring down at a raven scroll from the capital with both joy and terror. Generally, when an heir to a great house is married, an invitation is sent to other great lords and the king. This is done less as a real invitation and more as a courtesy. While lords like Tywin Lannister and Doran Martell had politely declined while sending their warmest congratulations as expected, the letter from the capital carried a different message. The handwriting was easily recognizable to Ned as he had seen it many times before. Dear Lord Stark. The king wishes me to inform you that he will gladly accept your invitation to your son's wedding in Winterfell. He has also asked me to inform you he will be bringing some members of the court with him, including myself, his brother Renly, his brother Baelor Tyrion Lannister, and a retinue of knights and retainers. Ned, I know how much of an inconvenience this will be, but he was adamant about wanting to see you, and I am also looking forward to seeing you. The Queen and royal children will not be coming, and my wife and son will also remain in the capital, so you need not prepare for them. I look forward to seeing you. I expect we will arrive a fortnight before the wedding. Humblest regards and warmest wishes. Jon of House Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, Lord of the Vale, Warden of the East, and the Hand of the King. Ned had to tell his wife immediately and had her summoned. The king was coming to their son's wedding and he was bringing a whole lot of other people with him. He was genuinely happy that he would not have to deal with the Queen or his sister Baelor, but the amount of buzz this would generate may bring even more guests to the wedding. There was a knock at his study door and he quickly invited his wife in, who sat across from him. "I received this from the capital this morning," he said, handing her the Raven scroll. Caitlyn's eyes got wider as she began to read it. They narrowed at one part and then relaxed by the end. "I am a little hurt that my sister's husband is willing to come to our son's wedding, but she is not," Caitlyn said, handing the letter back to Ned. Ned chuckled. "Well, I am glad that is the thing that bothered you the most about that letter," Ned said with a smile. "You know this is going to cause many other lords to come to the wedding that would have normally declined," he said, looking at his wife, who looked to be thinking about changes to seating that would need to be made. "It will be fine. It was good that he gave us 2 months warning to begin preparing. We should be able to house lesser lords in Wintertown and we can house the king in the guest house. I still believe the Tyrells should be given the first keep during their stay," she said, obviously voicing her plans to Ned more for herself than for Ned's benefit. Ned smiled. "I will leave you and Margaery to plan accordingly, my love. I am glad this is something you think we can manage. I am not sure you have ever seen Robert at a feast before," Ned said, somewhat worried. Caitlyn stood up, smirking. "I deal with Rickon every day. I think I can handle Robert Baratheon at a feast," she said confidently as she walked away from a smiling Ned. He was sure that she could as well. Caitlyn knew the Starks could survive a drunk king. It was the Queen of Thorns that kept Caitlyn awake at night. Notes: Bobby B is coming. Next chapter we get to see what Olenna thinks of a certain young wolf. I love the idea of some sort of closer relationship developing between Bobby B and Robb. So you all will get to see my impression of that soon. What I loved about writing really the first 1/3 of this fic was that I got to explore scenes and scenarios that weren't explored in the books or show. Chapter 11, The Roses Arrive. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. They were now a month away from the wedding. Robb stood in the courtyard with Margaery to his right as they prepared to greet the Tyrells. Sansa, Arya and Bran stood to the right of Margaery and Eddard. Caitlyn and Jon stood to the left of Robb. Rickon was being handled by a nurse far away from the courtyard that morning. These were going to be longer introductions, and Lady Stark did not trust her son to remain as quiet throughout the exchange as he had been with Margaery. Bran had told Robb he had seen the Tyrell caravan approaching. Bran saw that there were 3 wheelhouses and at least 60 men on horses riding with them. Robb expected one wheelhouse contained Margaery's mother and maybe cousins, while another contained Margaery's sizable dowry. The third he could only imagine contained Lady Olenna Tyrell, who would not tolerate her other female family members. As the first guards came through the gates, they were followed by the 4 Tyrell men and the wheelhouses. At the lead was a plump, proud man who looked almost spherical in his heavy furs. Robb assumed this must be Mace Tyrell. Behind him must have been his 3 sons. Robb identified Willers Tyrell, heir to Highgarden, rather quickly. Margaery had mentioned his accident in one of their letters, and Robb could see the brace on his knee and then the cane he used to walk, but he still seemed to ride well. Robb deduced then that the taller, stronger looking of the remaining 2 men must have been Garlan the Gallant. He was followed by the man who must have been Loras, who looked like Garlan only smaller. 3 of the Tyrell men dismounted before Garlan helped his brother Willers from his horse. The greetings began with Lord Mace being welcomed by Lord Stark and his wife. Robb was brought forward with Margaery, and in a blur, Robb had been introduced to all of Margaery's brothers and father. They were all polite, having been told all about Robb from Margaery. Next Robb was introduced to Margaery's mother, Aeleri Tyrell. She was a beautiful woman, but Robb found her dull compared to his Margaery. The person who came next was the most important person that Robb would meet that day. Margaery had prepared Robb as best she could for her grandmother. Robb would have to be at his sharpest that for the Queen of Thorns. "Lord and Lady Stark, I have the honor of presenting my grandmother, the Lady Olenna of House Tyrell," Margaery said, bringing her grandmother over to the Starks. The introduction carried with it more pomp and much more respect than the ones she had given to her parents and even brothers. But this was warranted. Lady Olenna was legendary for her sharp tongue and sharper wit. The direwolves would need to be on guard with the Queen of Thorns around. The greetings between Lord and Lady Stark and Olenna were polite and short. Lady Olenna had already picked her target for that day's hunt, and it was a certain auburn-haired heir standing near her daughter. She brought herself over to Rob and looked the boy up and down as Margaery repeated her introduction. "Grandmother, this is my betrothed Rob." She was cut off by Olenna, who waved her hand and said, Yes, I know who he is, dear. You are Robb Stark, heir to Winterfell. A young pup from what I can tell, but perhaps you are a worthy groom," she said as Rob felt the test beginning from Lady Olenna. Olenna decided to give the boy a second of respite to see what he could come up with in response. She changed her target to her own son. "It would seem a wise choice to marry our most prized rose to you, Lord Robb, on account your father thoroughly thrashed my son during Robert's rebellion." Olenna spoke harshly of her son, who laughed awkwardly behind her. Olenna changed her target back to Robb again. Time to see what the boy's mind was made of. She had set him up in a very odd position. Robb could defend Mace's honor, putting him in Mace's good graces while undermining Olenna. Not a wise decision. He could agree with Olenna and likely deeply offend Mace. Again, not a wise decision. Or Robb could simply be dull and brush off the comment. Not as unwise of a decision, but it would only make Olenna think less of him for not demonstrating any wit or charm. So, what would he do? "I believe I am rather confused, my lady," Robb said with a smirk. "I was under the impression you were House Tyrell's most prized rose. Forgive me, but if you and I are to be married, I believe the wedding we have planned will not be nearly grand enough," he said, his dimpled smirk hiding any nervousness at presenting his joking compliment. There were smiles forming on the faces of Margaery's brothers as Robb had done what they thought was impossible. This boy was quick and sharp. Much to the surprise of everyone, including Olenna, Robb had sidestepped the issue of Robert's rebellion, complimented Lady Olenna, and thoroughly diffused a tense situation. Margaery was in awe of him, more so now than any other moment. Olenna offered her hand to Robb with a smirk so that he could kiss it. Her approval fully given. "A witty compliment, Lord Robb, but this rose has her thorns," she said as he took her hand. "One last test of the young man's wit. And this wolf has his fangs," he said, placing a light kiss to the back of her hand. Olenna was satisfied. As he gently let go of her hand, she gave him one last sign of her approval. "A wolf you are indeed, Lord Robb," Olenna said, correcting her pup comment from earlier. Margaery looked at Robb with great approval as she went on introducing family members to family members, and Robb continued to graciously meet with the Tyrells. They enjoyed a wonderful breakfast. There would be a feast that night to welcome the Tyrells, but that afternoon Margaery took time to meet with her family for lunch to catch up with them. They had been catching up for a time as they enjoyed their lunch in the first keep together. The Tyrells had been given the whole of the refurbished keep as a home. It was larger than the guest house, and Catelyn and Margaery had made sure that it was lavishly adorned with everything the Tyrells could possibly ask for. "I like the boy, he seems to be sweet towards you, daughter," Mace said approvingly. "And I do believe Lord Stark has a very healthy respect for House Tyrell, giving us our own keep." It was respectful of Lord Stark to give them the first keep, but that was simply Eddard's character, and Margaery knew that. "They have all been so wonderful to us since we arrived," Aeleri voiced. "That is who they are, mother. Northerners are known for how they treat their guests," Margaery pointed out to her mother. "And he has treated you well, sister?" Loras asked with some concern. He knew more than anyone how much she cared about Robb, but now that they had been together, he needed to know if Robb still made her happy. "He has treated me better than I could have ever imagined, Loras. He is kind and honorable, and I know he genuinely loves me. His family took me in on the moment I arrived and have shown me so much love and respect since I have been here," Margaery said with a bright smile. This appeased Loras as he sat back in his chair smiling. "He seems sharp as well," Olenna said in a very pointed manner. "He is grandmother. I would like to say that that is partially my doing, but charm and quick wit seem to come to him as naturally as honor and justice do," she said with admiration in her voice. "A product of his southern mother and northern father, no doubt," Willers said with a noise of agreement coming from Olenna at his statement. The rest of lunch between the Tyrells went well. Lady Margaery was able to catch up with her cousin Eleanor, her sister-by-law Leonette, and her brother's squire Sam. Sam had quickly struck up conversations with Jon and Robb at breakfast, and Margaery imagined a friendship was forming between them. Margaery was sitting in her chamber's living space with Eleanor. A fire blazing in the hearth as the chill of the late afternoon began to hit. Eleanor was wrapped in her furs even indoors and despite the heated walls of the great keep around them. "How can you stand this cold, Margaery? I feel it all the way in my bones," Eleanor said with a small smile. Margaery knew it was not a slight against the North, just a cousin's complaints. "Would you believe me if I told you it does not bother me in the least? In fact, if I am being honest, I love the cold here," Margaery said, her body not even remotely near her furs as she lounged in one of her more casual dresses. "Do you just get used to it then?" Eleanor laughed and pulled her furs closer as she sipped hot tea. "I have felt this way from the moment I got here, Elle," Margaery said with a laugh. "Genuinely, I feel as though I was meant for this place," she said with a bright smile. "It must help having a handsome direwolf to keep you warm," Eleanor said with a playful smile towards a slightly blushing Margaery. Her and Robb had grown closer. He had told her he loved her, and she had said it back to him. Perhaps it was his love that kept her warm here, but her love for him kept him just as warm. It did help that they had shared steamy kisses and long nights talking in the living space of either his or her chambers, cuddled up, wrapped in furs on one of the couches, talking for hours. One of their first nights they did this, they talked with each other until the sun rose up in the sky. While that was a very hard day to remember because of how tired they both were, it was one of her fondest memories. They had never done anything dishonorable with one another. Both had agreed that they would be married soon enough and that any time they wished to spend doing that could wait until their marriage. They also worried that being caught in such an act may cause tension in the household, and she did not want to risk the respect and love she had been given by the Starks. Despite this, she did want him so badly and could safely say she was going to fully enjoy her bedding ceremony. "Margaery, you still with me?" Eleanor said with a giggle as she brought Margaery out of her musing. "Yes, sorry, Elle," she said, blushing. "He must really be good if you can drift off and think about him like that," Eleanor said with a teasing smirk. "We haven't done anything like that, Elle. Just kissing. But I will say he is incredibly good at that," she said, sipping her tea with pride as Eleanor giggled even more. "It also helps that his father has a ludicrous amount of money," Eleanor said with a sip of her tea. "I've heard Lord Stark may be richer than Tywin Lannister," Eleanor said as though the statement was secret gossip. The general consensus in Westeros was that Tywin Lannister was still the richest man in Westeros, with Eddard Stark close behind. Margaery had learned through her lessons with Lady Stark about the household accounts that not only was Lord Stark richer than Tywin Lannister, he was almost 1.5 times as rich as the Lord of Casterly Rock, and all that wealth would one day belong to Robb. While I am sure that would impress many of the women who one day call me Lady Stark, Robb is all I could ever ask for in the world. Everything else is just extra. He is the sweetest man I have ever met. He is honorable, kind, strong, gentle, chivalrous, intelligent, and everything else girls dream for in a man," she said with genuine joy in her voice. "I am so happy to see you like this, Margaery, and to know he is treating you right. I cannot wait to watch you marry him. Maybe you will give me some ideas for my own wedding one day," Eleanor said, smiling at her cousin. There was a knock at the door and Margaery asked who it was. The guard on the outside said it was Lady Olenna, and both Tyrell girls stood, and Margaery ordered her to be allowed in. Lady Olenna strode into the room. "Dear Eleanor, leave Margaery and me. I wish to speak with her a moment," Lady Olenna ordered politely but sternly. "Yes, Nana," Eleanor responded politely. Olenna may not have been her grandmother, but Lady Olenna had been like a grandmother to all of Margaery's cousins. The door closed behind Eleanor and Olenna sat down next to Margaery. "I wished to have a moment alone with you, my dear. You have done great work on the Stark boy," Olenna said, moving a hair behind Margaery's ear. "I do not feel as if I have had to do work, grandmother. It has been easy with Robb, to fall for him and love him," Margaery said with a smile. "Then you have truly been blessed by the gods, Margaery. Not many women in our position ever truly love their husbands. A rare few fall in love with them after being married to them for a time. But even fewer are blessed with love before their marriage. Garlan and Leonette come to mind, and now you and Robb. It seems as though my grandchildren are blessed with the gift of easy love," Lady Olenna said to her granddaughter. Margaery always knew her grandmother cared for her and loved her, but this sweet side to her was rarely ever shown to Margaery. Olenna usually calculated each word she said, but here and now all she was doing was speaking with Margaery as a grandmother would. "Thank you, Nana. I have never in my life felt as though the gods have smiled on me as much as they have these last few months. There is a happiness I have found here that I never expected to find," Margaery said, taking her grandmother's hand. "Then keep it safe, Margaery. Always remember this is your house to protect just as much as House Tyrell is mine to keep safe. Use your mind and your wits and whatever else you can. The world can be cruel, but women in our position have the ability to help keep safe those that we love." Olenna's tone became serious. She did not allude to any specific threat, just the threat of the world. Margaery understood all too well that Lady Olenna had been the brains of her family for several decades. Thankfully, Willers was just as sharp, and Olenna trusted House Tyrell's future to him. Olenna had kept them safe, and now Margaery would help do the same for House Stark. She would do as Olenna asked, use all of her gifts for the betterment of House Stark, the house she loved. "I will, grandmother, just as you have," Margaery said with pride and conviction. "Good, now I have a gift for you. I know we are not doing wedding gifts until just before the wedding, but I want you to wear this to the feast tonight." Olenna reached into her bodice and pulled out a long box. Margaery opened the box, and in it was a set of emerald stud earrings and a bright gold necklace with emeralds studded along it. She couldn't contain herself at the beautiful gift she had been given. "Grandmother, these are beautiful," Margaery said, lifting the necklace out of the box. Olenna rose and went to the door as Margaery examined the necklace and earrings and had one of the guards fetch Margaery's handmaidens. Olenna walked back over to her granddaughter. "I am glad you like them, my dear. Let's have you try them on." Just as Lady Olenna said this, 3 of Margaery's handmaidens came into the room. They helped place the studs in and the necklace on her neck. Margaery looked at them in the mirror. "These are wonderful, grandmother. Thank you so much," Margaery said, beaming at her grandmother once again. "Wear a green dress I had made for you with them. It will match wonderfully with your eyes. Let us enjoy you in Tyrell colors while we still can, my sweet," Olenna said. Margaery had taken to wearing House Stark colors more often than her own Tyrell ones. She still loved her family colors, but she had just felt it more appropriate to wear white, silver, and blue as opposed to the green and gold of her house. But tonight, she would be more than happy to wear her green and gold with this gorgeous new jewelry from her grandmother. "I will, grandmother. I will wear those colors with pride," Margaery said, bringing her grandmother into a hug. Olenna left and Margaery began to get ready for the feast that evening. Her handmaidens helped her into her dress. It was a beautiful green that matched the Tyrell sigil with gold vines and flowers embroidered symmetrically on the bodice and waist. The dress hugged her form and dragged slightly behind her. The neckline was flattering and went down between her breast. The cut on the back remained high as the dress was essentially sleeveless. The only true sleeves were the thick fabric straps that held the dress on her shoulders. Her furs that evening were blonde, lining a dark brown cloak. She was escorted down to the bottom of the great keep where the Robb, Jon, Bran, Theon, and Lord Stark were all waiting. Apparently, she was the first of the ladies to be ready that evening. She came gliding down the stairs with a handmaiden on each side. The men at the bottom couldn't help but stare up at the beauty that graced their presence now. Robb was wearing a dark brown leather tunic with a cape covering his right shoulder and a gold-studded, brown belt with brown boots. Interestingly, his furs matched his ladies, and the two would look like a very handsome couple to all that looked on them. "You look absolutely stunning, my lady," Robb said, kissing her hand when she offered it to him. "And you look as wonderful as ever, my lord," she said back to him with love in her eyes. "You two make a very handsome couple," Lord Stark said with pride at the 2 young people in front of him. "Forgive my wife and daughters, they will be down in but a moment," Lord Stark said, only for his wife's voice to come from above them. "A moment indeed, my love," Lady Catelyn said, followed by her 2 daughters and 4 handmaidens. "You look lovely, Cat," Eddard said with love in his eyes, making his wife blush. Margaery saw this and looked at Robb, who was thinking the same thing she was. This would be them when they were as old as the current Lord and Lady of Winterfell. Eddard still to this day adored his wife and showered her with compliments. He was even able to continue to make her blush. Margaery laced her arm around Rob's waist at the sight of his happy parents, and he responded by placing his arm around her mid-back. That was when Arya began teasing her parents. You have to do that here," she said playfully as Eddard kissed his wife. Robb and Jon began laughing, and Sansa huffed seeing Arya cause Eddard and Cat to separate. They did so with smiles, and they looked at their daughter. "What? Are you not going to tell them to not do that here, or are you only going to order your parents around?" Ned said, pointing at Robb and Margaery with their arms around each other. They were close to each other but were doing nothing that would be considered inappropriate. Margaery laughed at this and drew closer to Robb as Arya turned her gaze to the young couple. Thankfully they were saved when a Tyrell servant walked in. "Good evening, my lord. My lord Tyrell bids me inform you that he and his family are making their way to the Great Hall," the servant said politely. "Thank you. Let Lord Tyrell know we are also walking over," Lord Eddard said as the servant bowed and made his way out the door. The Starks then made their way to the Great Hall. When they met with the Tyrells outside the Great Hall, compliments were given freely, and in a mixed procession, they all walked in. Robb and Margaery walked in first this time, followed by Lord Stark escorting Lady Aeleri, Lord Mace escorting Lady Catelyn, Lord Willers escorting a nearly swooning Lady Sansa, Sir Garland escorting Lady Arya much to her delight, Lord Jon escorting Lady Leonette, and finally Lord Bran and Sir Loras escorting Lady Olenna much to the young boy's dismay but Lady Olenna's humorous delight. Margaery, Robb, Catelyn, Eddard, Mace, Aeleri, and Olenna were seated at the highest table in that order facing the hall with the other Starks and Tyrells below them. Lord Eddard stood to give a toast to a cheering crowd. His toast was short but very welcoming to his new future family. Mace Tyrell stood to attempt to give a speech only to be stopped by Olenna. The feast was a wonderful affair. Robb paced himself this time as he did not intend to get drunk in front of his future family by law. Jon was the center of attention for many of the Tyrell girls and handmaidens, much to the poor boy's chagrin. He politely danced with several of them. "Your brother seems to be the choice of the night for my lady cousins," Margaery said as she and Robb slow danced together. One hand was playing with the hair on the back of his neck and one hand was in his own. He pulled her closer to him with the hand that he had placed on the small of her back. "He does, doesn't he?" Robb agreed with a smile as his betrothed looked at him with love. "Lady Eleanor seems to be quite taken with him. Although, he does not seem as interested in her." Margaery giggled, knowing Jon would likely freeze in the snow before marrying a southern girl. She knew he meant no offense. Jon had the North in his blood, and she imagined he was more attracted to strong northern shield maidens than southern flowers. "God save him." Robb laughed. "Your cousin is a beautiful girl. He would be hard-pressed to find a more attractive girl than her," he said, looking back to Margaery. "Although I seem to have been rather lucky tricking you into falling for me. And you are by far the most beautiful woman in the whole world," he said, placing his forehead on her own. She blushed and giggled. "You are too kind to me, my wolf. Besides, how do you know it was not I that tricked you? I would imagine every girl in the Seven Kingdoms will come to cut my throat to try and get to you once you and I are married." She meant the statement as a jest and Robb knew it was a compliment, but he still hated the thought of someone trying to harm her. His response was partially a jest and partially truth. "Well, anyone that wants to cause you harm will be forced to get through me first, and believe me, if I am fighting for you, I will never lose," he said with deep and true conviction. She loved it when he wanted to protect her. He was so kind and sweet, but when her wolf bore his fangs, she couldn't help but find it unbelievably attractive. She knew he would never harm anyone out of malice or cruelty, but she also knew he would protect her and his family until his dying day. She wanted to kiss him right there but knew it would not be appropriate, so placed a chaste kiss on his cheek. "Thank you, my love. I will always feel protected and loved by you. I love you," she said after laying the kiss on his cheek. "I love you too," he said with a smile, his protective instincts having been cooled by her kiss. The rest of the night went on like this until Robb Stark did something no one expected. Lady Olenna had danced with no one that evening, preferring to make light conversation with Lord Stark or Willers. Robb Stark was the first man to ask her to dance that evening. "My lady, would it be too much to ask you for a dance?" Robb asked with an outstretched hand. Willers looked at the boy like he was suicidal, but Rob knew exactly what he was doing. Olenna looked surprised at first but then respectfully took the boy's hand as he led her to the dance floor. "That was rather bold, Lord Rob. My grandson thinks I may turn you to mincemeat before this dance is through," Olenna said as the two slowly danced together, their hands in the most proper positions they could possibly be. Both looked straight forward, not making eye contact. "Perhaps I will be, but I had not had the opportunity to speak with you and I feel as though I should get to know the Queen of Thorns," Rob said boldly, calling Olenna by her nickname. "You are a bold one, Lord Rob. What is there to get to know about me, HM? I am but an old woman here to watch her granddaughter marry the heir to a great house," Olenna said in her most innocent tone. "Come now, Lady Olenna, you and I both know you are the power behind House Tyrell. It would be in my best interest to make an ally of you if I can," Rob said, giving Lady Olenna a side-eyed look before returning his eyes forward. Lady Olenna was impressed. The boy seemed to already be well on his way to be a consummate political figure. "And what possible need would you have for an ally such as me?" she asked, genuinely curious as to the boy's motives. "My father may be both rich and powerful, but he lacks 4 eyes in places that one should never be blind to. I would hope that with our houses joining I could ask a favor from you," Rob said in a very serious tone. "You believe I may be able to provide the eyes for your father? Did Lord Eddard send you to me, or are you making this request on your own?" Now the game was beginning. She needed to know if House Tyrell was being used by House Stark, and she needed to know now. The Queen of Thorns was either going to become the greatest pain in Rob's side or one of his most trusted allies. "I ask of my own accord, my lady. I worry that while my father may understand the grander game of political alliances, he lacks the ability to play the dirtier side of the game. I worry that someone may try to use him one day and that it may be his downfall," Rob said, being entirely honest with Olenna. Olenna could detect no lie in the boy. He worried for his father. This young man of only 4 and 10 was already playing the game. She could hear Margaery's words in his mouth, however. She had brought this political weakness to his attention. Olenna smiled with pride at the thought that her granddaughter had brought this conversation up to Rob, and was even more proud that Rob was acting to deal with the suspected issue. "My granddaughter pointed this out to you, didn't she?" Olenna said with a smile, now looking at Rob. "Aye, my lady, she did," he said, amazed at how quickly Olenna figured out the situation. "Rob, you are right in that our interests will be aligned with your own just as yours will be aligned with ours. I will make sure to keep my eyes out for danger. But I cannot promise I will see everything, especially in the capital. Deceit is thick there, but I will do all I can to make sure your father is not taken advantage of, you have my word," Lady Olenna said truthfully. Rob had his father's honor, and armed with her granddaughter's skills, the boy would likely be able to accomplish great things one day. "I would ask you not tell my father of this conversation. I do not want him thinking I am going behind his back, but I want to make sure he is as safe as he can be," Rob said with genuine concern. "I will not say anything to him, but Rob, you must know that even if I keep my eyes out for him, the world can be terrible, and while I will always try to protect our family, just know that sometimes bad things can happen no matter what preparations we make." Lady Olenna's words were formed from years of experience. Rob knew that no matter what he did, bad things were always likely to happen. However, the very least he could do was try to stop them. Rob nodded to Olenna, and as the song ended, he bowed, and she curtsied, and he walked her back up to the high table and rejoined his bride-to-be. The rest of the feast was marvelous, and slowly the whole emptied as the night went on and the castle went to sleep. Rob laid in his bed awake for a time, knowing that he had done all he could to help guard his family like Margaery had advised him. Now he should sleep. He was getting married in a month, and soon his bed would not be so empty. Notes. Hope you all enjoyed the chapter. I just realized that I don't think I made the size of Winterfell clear in the way I have been writing about it, and next chapter I am going to be describing quite a lot of guests being present in Winterfell. If you think about Winterfell as being the Winterfell of the TV show, you would naturally think with the amount of people I am describing that it would be very cramped. However, Winterfell described in the books is ludicrously large and will easily hold the amount of people I will be describing being there. If you need a visualization of what that might look like, Shea Diversity created a 3D model of a pretty accurate Winterfell. It is not the exact design I had in my head when I was writing the story, but if you want a good visualization of what is basically 99% of what I had in mind with Winterfell, go look it up on YouTube. But do keep in mind that the Winterfell in this story has been refurbished and has an extra wall. Chapter 12, The King Arrives. Notes. Hope you guys enjoy the new chapter. I think I'm going to start leaving little behind the scenes notes at the end of all of my chapters, kind of explaining why I made the choices I made and sort of what it was like coming up with the story. Any important notes I'll put please read next to, but just for fun the end notes will be sort of explanatory. May even get a bit tongue-in-cheek with it and have the actors have a dialogue explaining how the scenes were shot, lol, but we will see. Read them if you like. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Guests began arriving in Winterfell the fortnight leading up to the wedding. Final preparations were being made for the wedding. There would be festivities all throughout the 2 weeks leading up to the wedding. As was custom, there would be no more feasts until the wedding feast the night of the actual ceremony. There would be large breakfasts and other special gatherings, but no feasts. The custom was a northern one, but it also made the feast the night of the wedding particularly boisterous and merry. Many northern lords would be arriving closer to the actual wedding day, but those northern who were coming from further away had already begun to arrive. Lord Eddard and Lord Mace personally greeted Lords Umber, Bolton, Karstark, and Marndaly on their arrivals. Willers Tyrell had been present for the greeting of Lord Marndaly and seemed to be particularly taken with his oldest granddaughter Winifred. At least that is what Margaery had said to Robb after she had spoken with Willers about the girl. Some of the Lords of the Reach were given the same welcome. Lord Paxter Redwyne, Margaery's uncle, was greeted by both Lord Stark and Lord Tyrell. He came with his daughter and wife. His sons would come with the royal court from King's Landing with the king. Lord Lytton Hightower, Margaery's maternal grandfather, had elected to stay in the High Tower. However, many of his children did come, most notably Margaery's favourite uncle Baelor Hightower, the heir to the High Tower, who is also called Baelor Brightsmile. Robb's uncle Ed Muir came up from the Riverlands. His grandfather Hoster Tully was unable to attend, but a specific reason was not given as to why. Robb's granduncle Brynden Tully arrived the day after Ed Muir, having been given leave from guarding the Bloody Gate. Finally, his uncle Benjen had been given leave to spend around a month in the south in Winterfell to celebrate his nephew's wedding. The guest house was reserved entirely for the king and his party, and the first keep was being occupied by Margaery's family, including the Tyrells, Hightowers, and Redwynes, all having taken up residence in the keep. Margaery still occupied her chamber in the Great Keep along with Robb's side of the family with the Starks and Tullys. Jon Arryn would also take a chamber in the Great Keep on his arrival. Other noble lords like the Boltons, Karstarks, Marndalys, and Umber would stay in both the Great Keep and other towers throughout the castle. Some other lords from the Reach, Riverlands, and Vale would be given places within the castle. Lord Royce, Lord Blackwood, and Lord Tarly were all granted different towers within Winterfell. Some lesser lords and knights were given spacious manses in Wintertown. These had been built during Lord Eddard's expansion of the town. Thankfully the town remained near empty during the summer years. In total, there were 500 lords who came with their families from all across the realm from Dawn to the Wall. Even more knights came to the wedding for the tournament after. There would be almost 3,000 highborn guests in attendance. Only the most noble houses and lords would feast in the Great Hall, with other attending in halls across Winterfell during the feast. The Godswood would be more than spacious enough for every highborn guest to be able to attend the ceremony in front of the old gods the evening of the wedding. Word reached Winterfell that the king was a day's ride away, and the castle seemed to fly into a flurry of activity. Servants scurried about placing last touches throughout the castle. Winterfell looked ready for the greatest celebration in living memory, and Lord Stark had spared no expense. Especially once word reached him that his friend, the king, would be attending. The Stark and Tyrell banners were hung from every walkway, and on every tower flew either the Stark direwolf or the Tyrell golden rose. The kitchens were always preparing food, and a tourney area was being measured out on the east side of the castle outside its 3 walls. Servants remained busy cleaning and handling chores and errands for the lords that were present. Lady Stark had brought on an extra 300 temporary servants to help handle the lords that were present. Small folk filled the inns in Wintertown. Thankfully these too had been expanded. Winterfell was still abuzz with activity when word arrived that the king was mere hours away. By the time the tourney would begin after the wedding, over 15,000 people would come to Winterfell to celebrate the wedding and watch the tourney. Catelyn and Margaery saw to a few final touches and everything was perfect and ready for the king's arrival. They both went and freshened up and met the rest of the Starks and Tyrells in the courtyard. Lord Eddard occupied the centermost position. To his left was Lord Tyrell, Lady Aeleri, Willers, Garlan, Leonette, and Loras. Behind the Tyrells were the Redwynes, Hightowers, and the Tyrell cousins, aunts, and uncles. Lady Olenna Tyrell was noticeably absent. An excuse was given that she was feeling ill that morning, but Margaery knew better. Lady Olenna found bending the knee to anyone to be distasteful. It also did not help that it hurt her back. To Lord Stark's right stood Lady Catelyn, Robb, Margaery, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon, and Jon. Behind them stood the Tullys, Benjen, and Theon. Stark guards and servants were all present as well. All present were wearing their finest clothes. Beautiful dresses, striking doublets, and soft furs. Lords from the houses that were staying in the castle were also spread throughout the courtyard. The great Jon stood with his son Little John while Roose Bolton stood next to his son Domeric. Robb could have sworn he caught Winifred Martindale stealing looks with Willers Tyrell. Before Robb could think on it any longer, horse hooves could be heard and suddenly two guards came through the gate carrying the Baratheon crowned stag banner followed by what must have been two members of the King's Guard and finally one of the fattest men Robb had ever seen in his life. His father and Mace Tyrell immediately kneeled which caused everyone else in the courtyard to drop to one knee including Robb and Margaery. The fat man was in fact the great Robert Baratheon. The man who crushed Rhaegar at the Trident. The man said to be once stronger than the Mountain in his prime. The man who Robb had been named after. Robb almost chuckled to himself at how large he was but was able to stifle the laugh enough. Only Margaery noticed and she knew why he was having to hold down laughter. Two servants brought over steps for the kings to step down onto. Robb heard the king get off his horse and quickly walk over to where his father was kneeling. He stood in front of Eddard for a moment before motioning him to stand up. Lord Stark stood and everyone else in the yard rose with him. It was then that Robb raised his head to see the king's retinue. An older balding man stood near the king in a blue doublet and brown furs with a falcon embroidered on his chest. That must have been Jon Arryn. Behind him was a young man as tall as Robb but obviously a bit older wearing fine silks and furs. Robb figures that was the king's brother Renly. The easiest man to identify was the dwarf having rather obvious difficulty getting off of his horse. Partially from being short and partially from the pain of having to ride the pace King Robert must have set. "Your Grace," Eddard said with a polite bow. The words seemed to almost anger the king who gave him an almost frustrated look. "You got fat." The words caught Robb by surprise as he saw the king scowling at his father. Robb wanted to laugh but kept a serious look on his face. It was very funny the extremely round king calling his lord father fat. Eddard handled this by looking down at the king's belly and then back at his face. Another moment passed before the two began laughing together and embraced in a brotherly hug. "Cat," King Robert said, embracing Robb's mother. "Your Grace." She politely responded, partially leaning into the embrace but only for a second. 8 years, why haven't I seen you? Where in seven hells have you been?" Robert questioned his father with a smile. "Guarding the north for you, Your Grace. Winterfell is yours." Eddard responded, smiling at his old friend. "And who have we here?" "You must be the man I have heard so much about and the reason I dragged my ass all the way up north," Robert said, offering his arm to Robb. "You must be Robb," he said as the two clasped forearms in a warrior's embrace. Robb felt a degree of kinship with the king already just by the gestures he gave to the young lord. "Yes, Your Grace. It is an honor to meet you," Robb said, keeping the greeting short and polite. "May I introduce my betrothed Lady Margaery of House Tyrell?" He motioned to his wife-to-be who gave her best curtsy to the king. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Your Grace. Welcome to Winterfell," she said with the politest tone she thought she had ever used before. My, you are a stunning flower, aren't you? My wife would be jealous for me even looking in your direction. Thank the gods she isn't here." he said before breaking into a wheezing laugh joined by Robb and Margaery's own chuckles. Robert met the rest of the Stark siblings before politely greeting the Tyrells. Robb found it odd how Robert stared at his brother Jon maybe a second longer than he should have before moving on. As Robert spent time with each Tyrell, Jon Arryn stepped forward and embraced Lord Stark. "It's good to see you, Ned. It really has been too long," Lord Arryn said politely. "I am glad that you came all this way. I know the travels could not have been easy on you knowing the pace Robert enjoys setting." Ned laughed as his foster father joined in. "It was not all that bad. My maester says I am in strong health for my age, and despite being tired most of the time I feel healthy," Jon Arryn said with a smile. "Lady Stark, I apologize on my wife's behalf. She did not think our son strong enough to travel yet," Lord Arryn said apologetically to Catelyn. "It is all right, Jon. It is in no way your fault. Is the boy sick?" Lady Catelyn questioned in a motherly tone. "No, my lady. He is admittedly a rather weak boy for his age. I am afraid his mother has not weaned him yet, but I am looking for a place to have him fostered to see if I can remove him from her caring embrace and allow him to be toughened up to some extent," Lord Arryn said with a smile. Catelyn had not allowed her sons to be fostered. Not because she was fearful of them being away though. She actually wanted them to grow up with Ned. He was a shining example of what any man should strive to be. Lord Eddard spoke up. "Well, your son always has a place with his family here in Winterfell," he said with a smile as Robert came back over to them. "Ned, take me to your crypts. I want to pay my respects," Robert said, his tone a bit more serious and urgent. Robb's father took his friend in the direction of the crypts, and the parties that were present in the courtyard began to mingle. "Lord Arryn, let me introduce you to my children." Lady Catelyn motioned and before guided the hand of the king in front of Robb and Margaery. "My lord, this is my son Robb and his betrothed Margaery Tyrell," Catelyn said with pride as Robb bowed and Margaery curtsied. "Please, there is no need for that, nephew," Lord Arryn said, opening his arms to embrace Robb, which Robb welcomed and returned. Lord Arryn did the same for Margaery. "Gods, you are a tall young man, Robb. You are taller than Ned was at the same age. And Lady Margaery, the rumors of your beauty do not do you justice," the hand said politely, making both young people smile. Jon Arryn was introduced to the rest of the Stark children, and Robb and Margaery began mingling with their new guests as bags were unloaded from a wagon by servants. "Margaery." Loras got both Robb and Margaery's attention as he walked toward them with Renly Baratheon walking behind Loras. "Allow me to introduce Renly Baratheon, Lord of Strom's End, Lord Paramount of the Stormlands, and Master of Laws. Renly, this is Robb Stark, heir to Winterfell, and this is my sister Margaery Tyrell," Loras said politely. Loras had served as a squire to Renly until only very recently being knighted by him. Margaery had told Robb about Loras. She told Robb in absolute confidence, and Robb swore never to tell a soul about Loras' choice in bed companions. Robb, however, had not assumed one of those companions would be the king's brother. It was rather easy to deduce by the way that they looked at each other. Although there was a care and even love that was exchanged in their glances. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Lord Robb. Someone told me you defeated Loras in a sparring match, is that true?" Renly said with genuine curiosity. Robb had not been aware people knew about that, and Loras seemed slightly defeated that the news had reached Renly. "Sir Loras had been going very easy on me throughout the match, and I simply caught him on the back foot. I wouldn't exactly call it a win on my part. Simply mercy on Sir Loras' part," Robb said politely, even though Loras had not been going easy on Robb at all, and the victory was a hard-fought and fair victory for Robb. "Well, either way it seems there is a legendary swordsman to be had in you," Renly said with a smirk before turning to and greeting Margaery, politely kissing her hand and showering her with compliments about her beauty. The greeting went on for a time as refreshments were brought out to the courtyard. Robb found himself speaking with Beric Dondarrion when a small man made his way over to Robb. Margaery had been politely mingling with some of the ladies from the royal court, leaving Robb all alone. "Robb Stark, if I am not mistaken. The soon-to-be married heir to Winterfell," the dwarf said as Lord Dondarrion politely excused himself. Robb had always been taught to be polite, but there was a sort of unfriendly rivalry between the Lannisters and the Starks. It started as the Lannisters represented what Northmen dislike about Southerners. They were greedy, backstabbing, pretentious, and treacherous. This rivalry was only inflamed by the sudden extreme wealth boom in the north and particularly in House Stark. Finally, the treachery and war crimes committed by Tywin Lannister during Robert's rebellion left an extremely poor taste in the mouths of the Starks, to say the very least. "And you must be Tyrion Lannister. It is a pleasure to meet you," Robb said as politely as he could, reaching his hand down to shake the hand already offered to him by Tyrion. "Was it my height that gave it away?" Tyrion asked with a smirk. Robb actually found this somewhat funny and chuckled. Fine, he would play nice with the little lion. "No, my lord, it was the blonde hair actually, but I could see why you would think it was the height," Robb said with a smile, getting a laugh from Tyrion. "Was the road good to you, my lord?" Robb asked as a courtesy. "Yes and no. You have wonderful brothels on the King's Road." But the king set a criminally uncomfortable pace up that King's Road, so I was not entirely able to enjoy the wonders of the north," Tyrion said, looking very disappointed. Robb smiled. He was beginning to enjoy his conversation with Tyrion when his bride-to-be walked up behind him. "Lord Tyrion, may I introduce my betrothed, Lady Margaery of House Tyrell," Robb said for what seemed like the 100th time that day. Lady Margaery curtsied and smiled at Tyrion. "My lord, it is wonderful to meet you. Lady Stark and I heard you enjoyed reading and so made extra candles available to you in the guest house. I also left a selection of some of my favorite books on the north in your desk drawer if you are looking for something new to read," Margaery said with a smile. Robb had no idea Margaery had paid that close of attention to the list of people staying in the castle. Lord Tyrion had to be on the bottom of people that were important within the walls of Winterfell, and yet she still put in the work to make sure he felt welcomed. Robb smiled in admiration at his betrothed. "My lady, that is incredibly thoughtful of you. I have not had a chance to thank Lady Stark, but if you see her, give her my gratitude. I will have to pay your courtesy back somehow," Lord Tyrion said, taking Margaery's hand in thanks for her king gesture. "No need, my lord. Your presence at our wedding is gratitude enough," Lady Margaery said, giving the dwarf's hand a gentle squeeze. "Thank you again, my lady. If you would excuse me, I will retire to my well-prepared chamber," Tyrion said as he walked off towards the guest house. "He seems very nice for a Lannister," Margaery said with a chuckle. Robb couldn't help but laugh as well. "What was very odd is I found myself enjoying my conversation with him. Perhaps not all Lannister are evil, scheming monsters," Robb said jokingly. He knew the Lannister were people who just had a not-so-savory recent history. Margaery laughed at his assessment and laced an arm through his as the two walked around mingling with their royal guests. Each morning after that for a week, Robb and Margaery broke their fasts together with a different lord's family inside the castle. They would then spend lunch separately with another lord or lady, enjoying their time with their guests individually. On this morning the king was to be their guest. This must have been the most nerve-wracking breakfast of them all. They chose the Great Hall as the place they would enjoy their breakfast this morning. The doors to the Great Hall gently opened and 2 Kingsguard entered, followed by the king. Robert had only brought 5 of his Kingsguard with him, electing to leave Sir Jaime Lannister and Sir Meryn Trant back in King's Landing with his family. One of the Kingsguard was the legend Sir Barristan Selmy, a hero of Robb's. Both Margaery and Robb stood when the king entered the Great Hall. "One of the worst things about being king is everyone stands up when you enter a room," Robert said with a laugh at the young couple, motioning them to sit. "Did they not stand for you when you were a lord, your grace?" Margaery asked politely with a smile. "You know, they did, but it was different. When I was just Lord of Storm's End, people didn't shit their pants afterwards when I told them to sit back down," the king said with another long laugh, making the couple laugh. "Generally, it would not be acceptable to swear like he was in front of a lady, but there are a number of perks to being king. Lancel! Lancel, get some wine, boy!" Robert yelled at his squire, who went running to the nearest cellar to find some wine for his king. "Will you two be drinking this morning?" Robert asked in a surprisingly polite tone. "No, your grace, unfortunately we have other guests to meet with and we would be hard-pressed to explain to them how we got drunk with the king at breakfast. Although I'm sure you would thoroughly enjoy watching me attempt to stumble my way to lunch," Robb responded with a laugh which caused Robert to laugh even louder. "Gods, I like you, boy. How old are you both? Robert asked. They really had not had the opportunity to speak this long with their guest of honor. We are both 4 and 10, your grace. Margary answered. God's what I would do to be 4 and 10 again. He laughed again as his squire returned with a flagon of wine. One of Rob's servants brought cups. Lancel poured a glass for Robert and was about to pour some for Rob and Margary when Robert cut him off. Damn it, Lancel, did they ask for wine? Robert yelled and Lancel froze. No, your grace. He said sheepishly. Did I tell you to pour them wine? Robert accused again. No, your grace. Lancel began to sink back. Then don't pour them wine. These are responsible young people and they have important matters to attend to after this breakfast. The only one who will be getting drunk is me. Robert replied, not so much as speaking as he was yelling, much to Rob and Margary's surprise. Rob was very glad he was not Lancel at that moment. Of course, your grace. My apologies, my lord and my lady. Lancel said, apologizing as a smirking servant came forward and poured 2 glasses of tea for the couple. Get out, Lancel. I believe this man here can pour my wine for me. Is that something you are capable of doing, servant? Robert said, looking at the servant next to Rob. Of course, your grace. Whatever I may do to serve. The serving man said in a calm, even tone. Years of this type of work had made him accustomed to any sort of outburst, even one from a king. The king seemed appeased and Lancel left the king and couple to their breakfast. Conversation was jovial and light. Laughing was almost always present in the hall as Margary and Rob charmed the king. The food was brought out and the king began to stuff his face. He was beginning to get somewhat drunk by this point. So, Rob, tell me, how are you with a sword? The king asked, stuffing bacon into his face. I would say that I am decent for my age, your grace. Rob replied humbly. Margary looked at him with a smile. He was much more than decent. I heard you beat Saloras. That takes more than just being decent. And don't tell me he was going easy on you. I've seen that boy spar, he never spars easy. Robert said, pointing a finger at Rob. You must be pretty damn good if you are already beating anointed knights in sparring contests. Thank you, your grace, but I still have much to learn. Rob said, taking the compliment in stride. And you always will, Rob. The best swordsmen and fighters never stop learning. I see a great future for you. I would like to see you fight sometime. Perhaps the gods saw fit to give you more than just my name. Robert said. Rob detected a hint of pride in his voice. I feel honored to be named after you, your grace, so if the gods have seen fit to bless me with your strength or ability with a sword, I would be even more honored. Rob said, and the king chuckled. Good lad. Robert said. The rest of the breakfast was again filled with laughter. At times the conversation turned serious and Robert would ask Rob and Margary their opinion on matters regarding the realm. They gave him wise advice and by the end he looked upon the young couple differently. Gone were the young lovers in Robert's mind. These two were wise beyond their years and represented the future of the realm. He had gained an extremely healthy respect for both of them. The king and couple went their separate way around mid-morning and Rob and Margary spent some time walking together and enjoying some peace and quiet. It did not last long as he walked her to where she would be meeting with the Mandaealis that afternoon for lunch. She was met there by her handmaidens, but only after Rob had been able to steal a kiss from her. He then walked to one of the smaller halls adjacent to the great hall where he would be having lunch with Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion was already seated sipping on his wine when Rob entered. Apologies, Lord Tyrion, I was escorting Lady Margary to her lunch with the Mandaealis. Rob said as he took his seat across from Tyrion. Nothing to be sorry for. Your betrothed is a beautiful woman, you should enjoy as much time with her as you can. Tyrion said with a smile. How have you found Winterfell, my lord? Rob asked as the serving girl poured him a glass of wine. Rob enjoyed wine but usually only at feasts. He would only sip on this glass. It is very cold, but your people are kind and I believe it is beginning to grow on me. I was actually wondering if I could ask a favor of you, Lord Rob. Tyrion said as their appetizers arrived. How may I be of service? Rob asked, wondering what a Lannister could possibly ask of a Stark. I consider myself a rather adventurous man, and one of the few man-made wonders of our world is just a few hundred miles north of here. I was wondering if you would ask your Uncle Benjen if I might accompany him back to the Night's Watch so that I may see the wall. I will have my own escort and I do not intend to stay long, but between you and I, it would be a wonderful experience to piss off the edge of the world. Tyrion said with a sly smile which made Robb smile as well at the rather mundane request. I will speak with him as soon as I am able, my lord. Robb said with a chuckle. Please call my Tyrion. And thank you, it is not often that I travel this far north, and I wish to see all that I can. Tyrion said. Actually, Tyrion, I just remembered that Lady Margaery, my brother Jon, my father's ward Theon, and myself will be going on a Lord's Progress a fortnight after our wedding, and we will be travelling north to Last Hearth first. My Uncle Benjen will accompany us there, and from Last Hearth he will return to the Wall while we go to Carhold and the Dread Fort. Perhaps you could accompany us then. Robb said. That sounds like a splendid idea, Robb. To good travels. Tyrion raised his glass of wine and Robb clinked his against it. The two spent the rest of their lunch speaking about the North, politics, and even philosophy. Tyrion was sharp and incredibly intelligent. This made Robb want to learn from him, and he found himself becoming a fast friend with the Tyrion. As the week leading up to the wedding began, there were hunts and family breakfasts. All the final touches were put in place to celebrate the greatest wedding the North had seen in a generation. Notes. So first, yes, Robb beat Loras off screen. Yes, I know you wish you could have seen the duel. Yes, there will be future duels you will see, lol. I have heavily buffed Robb's swordsmanship, so get ready for some fun kick-ass moments. Did you all notice Robert's little double take at Jon? This is sort of Robb and Margaery's story in this part, but in part 2 Jon becomes sort of a focal character, so he will get his story sort of flushed out. I know in the books Robb and Tyrion sort of have a very standoffish relationship, but I remember that being mostly based on the circumstances they were dealing with, so I decided to start them fresh. I also am aware there has not been a lot of conflict in the first several chapters, and that is mostly because the first third of this story is building up the changes in the world that I have made, so that the conflict in the later section of part 1 means something to you guys and you can understand what is going on. While this was just the introduction of Robert, you will get to see a different side of Robert in a later chapter that is a bit softer than the ridiculous drunken mass of a human being that you normally see with him. There were 2 pieces of information that I gave you in this chapter that will sort of push the plot in some soon-to-be-published chapters. They aren't plot drivers, but they will give the characters reasons to go places that will help develop their characters a little more. No spoilers for you guys, so I'll let you try and figure out what little things those were. And yeah, that's all I can think of to put down for you guys this time around. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you continue to enjoy. Chapter 13, Gifts. Notes. Just a fun little chapter. See notes at the bottom for my explanation on some of the gifts given. Also, it has been a week since I started publishing, and wow. Over 2,000 hits, and we broke 100 kudos yesterday. I am shocked. You guys are absolutely amazing, and the comments I have been getting have been so amazing. You have been kind in your criticism and downright sweet in your compliments. Thank you all for coming along with me on my first fan fiction, and don't worry, there is plenty to come. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Today was the day before his wedding, and Robb Stark could only be described as ecstatic. That morning, all of the lords were invited to the courtyard outside the Great Hall for the giving of gifts to the bride and groom. A select number of knights were invited, but the collection of men and women at the breakfast were mostly lords and ladies from across the 7 kingdoms. The breakfast was a magnificent one, and the weather could not have been more perfect. It was sunny and warm enough to be outdoors without having to wear any furs if one did not want to. Most of the guests did wear their furs, however. The Starks and Tyrells mingled with their guests before everyone was asked to take their seats for the meal and gifts. At the main table facing the area where the guests were with their backs to the Great Keep, sat the Tyrells and Starks. Margaery and Robb sat at the center of the table, and their families were on either side of them. Both had elected to wear their finest outfits, with Margaery in a beautiful blue dress and her blue cloak lined with white furs, while Robb was in a black doublet lined with silver, wearing brown furs on a brown cloak. The tables closest to the wedding party were occupied by the Tullys, Jon Arryn, and Benjen Stark at one table, the Tyrell cousins at another, the high towers at another, and the red wines at another. The king and his retinue were also sat at a table close to the main table. The breakfast would be filled with speeches and merriment, but the main reason so many lords were here was to see the giving of gifts. Some lesser lords had given their gifts privately to the couple or through a proxy before the breakfast. Other lords had given their gifts to the couple early in the breakfast but had done so with little ceremony. Now the time had come for the presentation of gifts from the highest-seated lords and the families of the bride and groom. Lord Marndale had given the couple beautiful furs, while Lord Bolton had gifted spurs to Rob and a beautiful red dress to Margaery. Lord Umber gave Rob a large gilded ale mug and a wine set for Lady Margaery. Lord Karstark gifted Rob with a collection of leather and furs to be made into clothing of his choosing, while Margaery was gifted beautiful tapestries made by his own daughter. Lord Tarly gave Rob and Margaery fine saddles for their horses. Sam had been thoughtful and gave Margaery a writing set with a specialized desk and sets of quills so that she could now write her own northern stories, and Rob a book on the Reach. Tyrion Lannister next stood when it was his turn and addressed the couple directly. Lord Rob, Lady Margaery, I must first say how blessed I feel to have been able to come. You have shown me a warmth and friendship I had not expected to find here in the north. With that, 2 servants came forward, each with a book. Lady Margaery, I had heard you were fond of northern stories and books. I had this chosen for you. It is called a collection of ancient northern poems and tales collected by Lord Horion Bolton and Maester Gulywin. Tyrion said as Lady Margaery stood to examine the book. This is a wonderful gift, my lord. I will enjoy reading this very much. Thank you. Margaery said with a smile that was so bright Tyrion found himself smiling simply because she was. And Lord Rob, this is the accomplishments of the House Stark as the Kings of Winter by Archmaester Marwick. I hope it will serve as a reminder of all the accomplishments of your house and everything you as a future lord are capable of. Tyrion said with pride at his new friend. Thank you, my lord. During my time getting to know you, you have been nothing my kind to me and my lady, and I consider you a true friend. Rob said, returning the smile given to him by Tyrion. Now they had reached the point where King Robert would give whatever gift he had for the couple, and all looked on to see just what gift he intended to give. The king stood when he knew it was his turn. Lord Rob and Lady Margaery, you have both been so kind and gracious to all of us in attendance here throughout our stay in Winterfell, and I do believe I speak for all of the lords and ladies present when I say how blessed we feel to have been made a part of such a special occasion. He looked out into the crowd, who all clapped in agreement. I have only known these wonderful young people for a short time, but I can safely say that I have found true friends in the both Lord Rob and Lady Margaery. When it came to picking out the gifts, Lady Margaery, I left my wife in charge of yours, so if you have any problems with it, take it up with the Queen. All in attendance laughed at the small joke as a servant came forward with a medium-sized box. He opened it, and inside was a beautiful solid gold hairpiece that was meant to be worn on the back of the head and would drape down Margaery's long brown locks. This is beautiful, your grace. Please tell her grace the Queen that her choice in gift was not only stunning but something I will use whenever I can. Margaery said from her seat at the from table. Robert smiled and looked at Rob. Now Rob, I am sure you know that if the Queen had to pick out your lady's gift, I was tasked with choosing yours. King Robert said with a smile as a much larger box was wheeled in on a cart in front of the main table. I had your father secretly have you measured for this when he was having your wedding clothes made. King Robert said as Rob stood up and the servants opened the large box. Inside was an extraordinarily beautiful set of armor arranged as if it were on someone's body, with the helmet at the very top and armored boots at the bottom. The steel it was made out of glistened like silver, and its edges and where the plates met one another were lined with gilded steel. The breastplate had the direwolf of House Stark on it in the center. The helmet was a full-face helm with the large visor opened. If visor was opened, it would show the wearer's face in its entirety. When closed, there was a small slit that would be used for seeing, but the helmet was unadorned and unencumbered by extra frills, just as Rob would want it. The armor was beautifully functional, but it also looked easy to move in. This is stunning, your grace. Rob had walked around the table and was examining the armor next to the king. I had the best smith in King's Landing make it for you. He forged the steel to be lighter but have more protection, giving you the ability to move more than the average knight but be just as protected. The king said with a smile. Rob could tell he was right. The steel was forged better than any he had ever seen, and it did look like he would be able to move as much as he liked in the armor. "Your Grace, this gift is magnificent." "Thank you," Rob said, bowing his head, and Robert clapped the boy on the shoulder. Both men returned to their seats as gift-giving went on. The Hightowers gave Rob a Mirish fire and Margari a beautiful bracelet of diamonds. The Redwynes gave a joint gift, telling the couple a strong ship was being built for them in the Arbor. One that was fast but strong. The Tyrell cousins gave Margari another dress and Rob a stunning doublet. The Tullys gifted Rob with a boar spear and Margari a new hawking glove. Jon Arryn gave the couple a pair of Geofalcons, one male one female. Benjen Stark was not expected to give a gift, as members of the Night's Watch did not technically belong to any house, but Benjen had given Rob a small carved wooden knight before the breakfast. Benjen told Rob that it wasn't a toy but rather a keepsake, so that Rob would not forget Benjen and the Black brothers. Finally, the Tyrells gave their gift to the bride and groom. Mace Tyrell stood and presented a beautiful stallion for Rob and a mare for Margari.